Hey friends! Glad to see you on my channel. If you enjoy my content and want to support the channel, there's a PayPal link in the profile description. You can make a small contribution to treat me to a cup of tea. Thank you for your support. Let's get into the video. The story began in an ordinary office. Nothing special, but today something has changed for two people. The event started in the office of CEO Cha Jong-moo, a very handsome and responsible man. His secretary asked if she should lower the blinds since the man was frowning. But the reason wasn't the sun, as the CEO explained, it was a resignation letter. Concerned, the secretary approached and asked why this was a problem. She explained that she had written it properly and everything should be perfect. The man confirmed that it was indeed flawless because she always did an excellent job. The problem was the fact that she wanted to quit. And it was so sudden for him that he struggled to find the right words. The girl looked away, adding that it was for personal reasons. The CEO fell silent, adjusted his tie, and admitted to himself that secretaries can always be replaced. But with Min Seol-ha, they had been working together for 3 years. 3 perfect years. He wasn't exaggerating. That's how their teamwork truly felt. She was an outstanding employee. She could finish tasks even before the CEO asked for them. She stood out among the other employees with her responsibility. There was a time when she went on vacation, and for the man, it was hell. He couldn't keep up with anything, and now this girl wanted to leave for good. He didn't want to lose such a qualified worker. He turned to Min Seol-ha with some concern, reminding her that they had been working together for 3 years, and she should understand that without her, it would be very difficult for him. Cha Jong-moo asked if something had happened and if he could help solve it. The girl shook her head. Nothing had happened. The man wondered what could be wrong if it wasn't a specific situation. So he tried to offer a salary increase. But no, the girl replied that she already had the highest salary in the industry. A promotion was also out of the question because unpleasant rumors might spread, suggesting favoritism. A car wouldn't work either because Min Seol-ha didn't have a driver's license. The CEO saw that the girl was determined, unshakable, like a mountain. He took a step back and leaned on the desk, asking what he should do. Adjusting his tie again, he asked if there was anything she wanted. He could give her anything she wished. She just needed to say it. Min Seol-ha clenched one hand into a fist, barely holding herself back. She had been restraining herself for so long, and now the CEO himself was asking what she wanted. And it was only because the man was used to her and didn't want to let her go. That also pushed her to speak. Min Seol-ha blushed before speaking, but eventually began. And somehow, unexpectedly and boldly, she blurted out a wish to spend a night of pleasure with the CEO. Of course, saying this to such a man was a daring decision. He didn't even have time to be surprised. The girl immediately started trembling when she realized what she had just said. Then Cha Jong-moo finally found his voice and asked if he had heard her correctly. The girl covered her face with her hands, saying she must be insane and that they should forget about it. Just as she was about to leave the office, the CEO said he would think about it. And he would give his answer to the secretary by the weekend. Hopefully, Min Seol-ha would still be working there by that time and wouldn't quit. Right after this conversation, the girl went to the cafeteria to meet her colleague, who was also her friend. The girl with short hair, pleasant appearance, and a cup of coffee in her hands couldn't believe what her friend had done, what she had said. She even asked again if they were talking about the same Cha Jong-moo. Was it really the same CEO, Cha Jong-moo? Handsome, young, stubborn, and hardworking. The man whose appearance enchanted all the girls in their office. But according to the main character, it was indeed that very Cha Jong-moo they were talking about. Her friend reminded her that she couldn't even confess her love before, and now she had made such a bold request. Honestly, Min Seol-ha cursed that stupid crush. Why did she even need it? And to make matters worse, it had all started a long time ago. Exactly 3 years back. They were walking down the street together, talking about the general director's meeting. It was a cold season, and that day was cold too, so the secretary lady got a little chilly. The man noticed her cheeks, ears, and nose had turned red. He said that if Ms. Min was cold, she could calmly go back to the office. But Seol-ha apologized for bothering him and said she was fine. Later on, a colleague approached Ms. Min and said that the general director had left them hand warmers. He gave such warmers to everyone, so the secretary wanted to see what she had received. It turned out there were pills, a hand warmer, and a sweet note with wishes. A simple note saying, "Hope you work well today," stirred more feelings than it should have. Sometime after that day, Ms. Min heard that their general director was getting married to a girl from some company. Of course, they were a perfect match, so they were getting married. Naturally, Min Seolha got a little upset. When she came home, she decided to calm herself with a cup of tea. She tried not to be sad because she already knew she never had a chance anyway. She tried to convince herself that this was how it was meant to be, and she should have hoped less. These thoughts led her to wonder what kind of girl the bride was. Probably cheerful, very beautiful, from a good family. No wonder, they're perfect, so they fit each other perfectly. Their wedding would be grand, and the general director would look good in his wedding suit. Lost in thought, the girl poured too much water into her cup. She hadn't even noticed when she became so captivated by that man. After that day, they had one conversation. To be precise, the general director carefully asked if Ms. Secretary was okay because she had become clumsier, which was unusual for her. The girl apologized. It was hard to admit that it was because of him. Later on, the girl decided it would be better to resign rather than cause trouble. Grabbing her face, Min Solha desperately said she was pathetic. A friend said that was too harsh and maybe he liked her too. He didn't reject her after all. He said he'd think about it. If he didn't care, he would have immediately fired her. The colleague was sure he had some feelings, while the secretary felt foolish. Seeing something, the friend put a coffee cup on the table, telling Min Seolha to sit and just listen. When the general director passed by, she started speaking louder. She said things as if someone was flirting with Min Seolha and she was rejecting him. The girl didn't understand this nonsense, but it was her friend's plan, to make the general director jealous of an imaginary admirer. Ms. Min nearly ruined everything when she wanted to ask what her friend was saying. But by then, Cha Jung-moo was already at their table, addressing the secretary. It turned out he had been messaging her, but the girl hadn't seen it. At the same time, her friend texted her saying that he was definitely jealous. The girl was distracted when the general director asked what time their meeting with another company was. Min Seolha replied hesitantly, saying it was at 5. The man noticed someone was messaging her and said that if it was work-related, she could reply. But it wasn't work-related. She said as much, but Cha Jung-moo asked who kept messaging her like that. He hadn't asked personal questions before, so it was strange that he suddenly started. Ms. Min decided not to lose her composure and said it wasn't important. A few seconds later, the elevator doors opened and they were supposed to get out. The secretary started to leave, but the general director stopped her. Then he pressed her against the elevator wall to say something. First, he pressed the button to close the doors and said he had an answer to her request. He hadn't thought much, but he already had something to say. It turned out he wasn't against fulfilling that request. But there was a condition. The girl shouldn't limit him in quantity. To be exact, the general director didn't want it to be just one night. Ms. Min was surprised by what she heard. She hadn't expected him to agree, let alone say something like that. The man joked that now Min Seolha didn't seem so combative anymore. She tried to say something, but stammered and mumbled out of embarrassment. Smiling, Cha Jung-moo teased her, saying he couldn't hear her at all. She was speaking too quietly. Then she spoke more confidently, saying they had a deal. That very evening, the two of them went to a luxurious hotel. As soon as they entered, the man attacked her with kisses. He embraced her just as she had dreamed before, though she never thought it would actually happen. They enjoyed kissing each other, their lips moving gently and skillfully. The girl clenched the director's shirt in her hand while he ran his other hand through her soft hair. When they began to run out of breath from the intense kiss, the man opened his eyes. Soon after, he slightly pulled away from his secretary's lips. Cha Jung-moo looked at her, admiring her, and then spoke. He asked, just to be sure, if she was really certain about what they were about to do. After all, it wasn't too late. He could stop and leave her be. The secretary didn't answer right away. She was too shy and blushed deeply. She clearly replied that no, he shouldn't stop, and pulled him towards her by his tie. After that, they both ended up on the bed. The girl was lying down, while Cha Jung-moo hovered above her. More than anything, he was worried she might regret it later. But she was the one reaching out to him. So he took her hand and pulled her closer to him. He kissed her wrist and warned her not to complain later. But she was unlikely to regret it. All she wanted was to continue and feel the touch of the man she had dreamed of. In her eyes, he saw so much desire that he took off his shirt, showing off his impressive physique to the girl. After that, they immediately reached for another kiss. There were many more passionate kisses and whispers that night. Unfortunately, they couldn't spend the whole night enjoying each other's bodies, as the man had a meeting. Cha Jung-moo said it would be better for her to go home and apologized for not being able to drive her himself. He thought she needed to rest, and he would manage everything on his own. He emphasized that he had thoroughly exhausted her today. Realizing his words, the girl blushed furiously. Embarrassed, she agreed that she really did need a good rest. She asked him to call her if anything happened, said goodbye, and left. Cha Jung-moo watched for a while as the taxi drove away. And it would have been hard to say what exactly he was feeling, judging by his face. The girl was quickly brought home, and she decided to dedicate the entire evening to herself. She washed her hair, filled a hot bath, and gladly sank into it. She still couldn't figure out how she would even look him in the eyes tomorrow. This night would stay in her memory for a long time. It was so wonderful, yet so strange. And it would be impossible to stop thinking about it. The director was incredible. When he took off his shirt, a gorgeous body was revealed underneath. And how enchanting his face looked when he loomed over Min Seola. Thinking about this, she spent a lot of time in the bath. It was already time to get out. It wouldn't be good if she kept floating in the clouds like this. Suddenly, a notification on her phone distracted her. She flinched. What if Mr. Cha had messaged her? She really hoped so. It turned out to be just a spam message. But what surprised her most was that she had been hoping for a message from the director. Flopping onto the bed, she remembered that he wouldn't message now as he was in a meeting. And overall, she understood they weren't even dating. He wasn't obligated to write. The girl turned off the light, stared out the window for a while, and eventually fell asleep. Nothing should have disturbed her sweet sleep. But in the middle of the night, her phone suddenly rang. The girl had just fallen asleep, so she wasn't too happy that someone wanted to talk in the middle of the night. Barely opening her eyes, she looked at the bright phone screen. And in a second, she jumped up, answering a call from Cha Jung-moo. The man asked if he had woken up the secretary lady, and she lied that she hadn't gone to bed yet. Min Seol-ha asked if everything was all right since he was calling so late. The CEO replied that overall, everything had gone very well. He wanted to call earlier, but Director Kim had been drinking and wouldn't let him. He explained that he tried his best to call not too late, but it hadn't worked out very well. At the end of his monologue, he apologized for not giving her a ride home. And then he apologized again, realizing himself that he was rambling nonsense. They said goodbye, wished each other a good night, and hung up. Min Seol-ha lay down on the bed, thinking it was strange but very sweet. He called just to apologize and wish her a good night. The girl felt so many emotions at once that she doubted she would fall asleep. The man, holding the phone in his hand, was surprised at himself. They had been working together for 3 years, and there had been many rumors around them. But they subsided a bit when people saw how capable Seol-ha was. These 3 years, they had seen each other almost every single day. This girl was talented, skilled, confident, diligent, beautiful. So he had no doubt that he had feelings for Min Seol-ha. It would be strange to lie to himself and say she was just a secretary, but in front of others, it was a necessity. Cha Jung-moo had set boundaries to prevent rumors that would upset her. That night, when he returned home, he went to take a shower. He took a hot shower, unable to shake off memories of their night together. And the way she asked for it? Wasn't that even more endearing? The entire time he was in the shower, he couldn't stop thinking about Min Seol-ha. She had been so alluring when she asked to spend the night together. From the CEO's perspective, it was almost too sweet and made him want to repeat that night. In the morning, Min Seol-ha acted as usual, bringing his documents and organizing his schedule. She didn't forget a fresh sandwich and coffee. Their typical morning routine, so to speak. The CEO noticed she was stubbornly trying to behave as if nothing had happened. Was it her professionalism, or was she trying to use the routine to ease the awkwardness in their relationship? He decided to find the answer to that question and addressed the secretary. He asked if she had enjoyed their night together. At first, she really seemed to pause, as if lost in thought. Then she remembered the CEO's impressive body, and how he kissed every corner of her body, especially her neck, chest, lips. Then she blushed, turned away, and pretended not to understand, saying she had slept like the dead that night. Cha Jung-moo smiled. So after all, she was hiding behind the routine. Suddenly, the man asked if the secretary had heard rumors about his engagement. The girl turned pale, recalling the fiancé, while the man said he was shocked by such ridiculous gossip. The CEO asked if that was why she had made that proposal. Miss Min grew nervous, avoiding his piercing gaze. She didn't have to answer, as the phone interrupted them. She apologized, took out her phone, and checked who had messaged her. At that moment, her face changed. First, she was surprised. Then her expression darkened. The man even asked if everything was all right and if the message was work-related. Stammering, the secretary replied that it was personal. A bit later, in the CEO's office, the girl asked for a day off tomorrow. She explained that she understood it was difficult to be without a secretary during such a busy time, but she really needed it. The man asked her not to worry about that and said he was more concerned about Chasiola's condition. She said she was fine and that her absence wouldn't cause any problems. That day, the girl still had work to do, but she was much quieter than usual. But the CEO couldn't believe it, as if everything was fine. The next day, the girl didn't go to work but went somewhere else. Every year, closer to winter, she visited her father. No, he was alive. However, he had been in a correctional facility for a long time. Every year since she started visiting, her father never came out to meet her. That made her sad, but in some way, she had gotten used to it. Once, her father hit a person with his car. He hit them and fled, leaving the still-living body behind. It was hard to believe that her kind and decent father had done such a thing. The man who was supposed to bring her father out tried to comfort the girl, saying that every time he hears about her visit, her father becomes a little happier. After that, she always stops by a nearby shop. Small gifts were sold there. Today, she came across a rare snowman. Still upset, the girl said she wanted to find a different toy. They offered to exchange it, but the girl wanted to find it herself. The cashier lady asked which toy Min Seolha was looking for. It was Rudolph, the little reindeer. That toy reminded her of her father. On the way home, it even started snowing. A beautiful time, the girl thought. It was Yoon Shim asking how the visit went. That was a difficult question, which she heard every year from her friend. After her father's arrest, Min Seolha was sent to an orphanage where she met her best friend, Yoon Shim. While they talked, the girl had already reached home. She knew that Yoon Shim was worried. Her friend wanted to invite Min Seolha somewhere, but she wasn't in the mood. Instead, they decided to have a beer together at the girl's place. Unexpectedly for Yoon Shim, Min Seolha thanked her for something. The main character explained that she was very grateful for Yoon Shim's friendship. At first, her friend said that everything was fine, then suddenly screamed into the phone. It turned out there was something else very important. Good news. Apparently, Mr. Cha approached her today and asked about the girl. The man had actually been worried all day about whether Cha Seolha was all right. He couldn't get the sad expression on Min Seolha's face out of his mind. Could something have happened to her? That's what wouldn't let him rest. The girl called the CEO when she saw that he had texted her. He said that everything at work was calm, but Min Seolha was an excellent secretary. But he was worried because he couldn't get a reply from his secretary. And was everything really fine? Or could she tell him why she had taken the day off? He blurted out that of course he had no right to insist. It just bothered him. She didn't give a clear answer, only said that it wasn't serious and thanked him for his concern. Right after that, her friend arrived and the girl apologized to the CEO. He said he understood and bid farewell to Miss Min. After the conversation, Cha Jung-moo collapsed into his chair and relaxed with a sigh. The man became curious who had come to visit the girl so late at night. The next morning, rumors about Min Seolha began spreading in the office. The girls were saying that Miss Min had become happier and kept checking her phone. It seemed they were hinting that the secretary might have someone. Cha Jung-moo remembered a conversation he had overheard between Min Seolha and her friend about some guy, and he himself had noticed what the employees were talking about. His lady secretary had recently been frequently texting or talking to someone on the phone. And even that day, when he was looking for Miss Min, it turned out she was once again talking to someone. The CEO met her already in his office. The girl said that another company had called, requesting a meeting as soon as possible. Moreover, Director Kim would personally visit them. Besides, the girl said she couldn't have lunch with Cha Jung-moo today. The director's tone turned more saddened, and he asked why. Min Seolha replied that she had things to do. Nothing special. Then the director turned back to the girl and asked why she was avoiding him. Min Seolha didn't even quite understand such a sudden question. The director looked away and asked if she found him disgusting after that night. Maybe not disgusting, said the director, but perhaps Ms. Min just isn't interested. After all, she took a day off on Friday and hasn't been at her workplace all day today. The director asked if this was because of that guy Ms. Lee had mentioned. Min Seolha explained that it was a misunderstanding. She had left her workplace to book a table for the director's meeting, and on Friday, she had personal matters. So she wasn't avoiding anyone. It just happened that way. Moreover, she pretended not to know which guy he was talking about. When Cha Jung-moo asked who had come to see her yesterday, it turned out it was Yoon Shim. Upon hearing that, the man felt relieved and a little awkward. Actually, the girl wanted to talk about something else, but they were interrupted by a knock on the door. An urgent meeting was called, said the employee outside. So the two of them went there together. The man probably wanted to avoid the conversation a little because he felt awkward about his questioning. But sooner or later, Min-sola decided she would tell him everything. The meeting was not very informative, yet there was no time left to talk. After all, during working hours, the director worked hard without distractions. A little later, when the man was somewhat freer, the girl thought to try talking again. But as soon as she raised her head, the man was already talking with her colleague. She didn't look closely to see if it was an important conversation and decided it could wait. After a while, evening came. It was already 7 and the director was still busy. The girl gathered her papers. All day, what she wanted to say had been bothering her. She was genuinely upset that they couldn't manage to talk. It was important. The man appeared suddenly and asked why Min Seolha was still there. It turned out she still had some tasks left. Cha Jung-moo told her not to overwork herself, and the girl decided this was her chance. Before Cha Jung-moo could close the door behind him, she quickly ran up. The man stopped when the secretary lady called out to him. He turned around, looking questioningly at Min Seolha, who was closing the door behind her. The girl said something unexpected. She asked him to forget about that request. She also apologized for causing trouble, but the man was already unpleasantly surprised, not understanding anything. Min Seolha explained that she was not in her right mind and didn't understand what she was saying. Instead, the director pressed her against the table surface, asking why she was saying this. The man asked if it was because of his clumsiness. Maybe he had hurt her or something. Min Seolha dismissed those assumptions, and Jung-moo, drawing closer, asked why she was pushing him away then. After all, according to director Cha Jung-moo, she was not indifferent to him. For all 3 years, he had been hiding those feelings, and now this proposal. Why did she want to reject it? He couldn't understand it all. And Min Seolha couldn't believe what she was hearing. Could it be that this incredible man, like her, had been a prisoner of his feelings for so long? Could it be that all this time, while she was suppressing her feelings, he had felt the same? She used to be upset by rumors about his wedding, and now it turned out that the only person this man had feelings for was her, his secretary. All this didn't fit in her head, and she blushed all over. Cha Jung-moo recalled her day off on Friday. He was so worried then that he couldn't find peace. He wanted to visit her, to check if she was okay, but thought it would be too much. Still embarrassed, Ms. Min shyly admitted that she also had feelings for the director. The man smiled first only with his eyes, lowering his gaze to Min Seolha. Then he smiled with his lips and placed his hand on Seolha's cheek. Enjoying this touch, the girl put her hand on Jung-moo's hand as well. But the man reminded her that she was probably in a bit of a hurry right now. She blushed even more and was about to leave, but Jung-moo stopped her. He said she wouldn't have to work overtime today because she had other plans. At first, the girl didn't understand what plans he meant, but it turned out those plans had just appeared. For both of them. So now they would both leave work to enjoy each other's company, the general director said. Lying on the hotel bed, the girl felt even more nervous than during their first time. But so what? She decided to stay embarrassed without taking her eyes off that handsome man, who was blushing as he leaned over her. Once again, they kissed and hugged passionately, as if they wanted to devour each other. The general director's touches were also full of emotion this time. It felt very gentle and pleasant for the heroine. Very quickly, certain pieces of their clothing ended up on the floor. Nervously, the girl said she might not meet Mr. Cha's expectations. She herself assumed she might not be that good. However, Cha Jung-moo believed that even if that were the case, it was his fate, and he would accept it. The man was probably even a little surprised at how active and sensitive Min Seolha was during the process. She was like a dream, yet still doubting herself. The man was probably even a little surprised at how active and sensitive Min Seolha was during the process. She was like a dream, yet still doubting herself. The next morning, their hotel room was in complete chaos. The heroine was the first to wake up, feeling sore all over. The man didn't let her sleep all night, until morning. Of course, after so many rounds, the girl wasn't surprised by how she felt. As soon as Min Seola touched the man, he woke up immediately. Cha Jong-moo took her hand and asked if her actions meant that yesterday hadn't been enough. After all, he wouldn't mind spending their weekends the same way. In fact, the man admitted he would love to see Min Seolha by his side every morning. They lay in bed for a long time afterward, talking about many things and cuddling. And so it happened that on her first working day of the week, the girl realized she hadn't slept at all for the past 2 days. On Saturday, Cha Jong-moo invited her to a fancy restaurant. He even cut Seolha's steak for her. She tried to explain that she could do it herself, but the man was stubborn. He confessed that he enjoyed taking care of Min Seolha. Every time her dream man said things like that, the girl blushed like it was the first time and smiled sweetly. That weekend, they also went for long walks, holding hands. Overall, for the first time in 3 years, they spent 2 days together as a couple. Of course, on Sunday, the girl still had to go home, and Cha Jong-moo even walked her there. He asked her to call him once she got into her apartment. Right now, the girl felt as if those 2 days were her twisted but beautiful dream. Seolha's thoughts were interrupted by her friend calling out from behind. It turned out Yoon Shim had been calling her several times, but her friend had clearly been lost in thought. Yoon Shim asked, "What could have made the always cautious Seolha float in the clouds like that?" The heroine remembered that the last thing she had told her friend about her feelings for that man was about his offer to make love. So now she shared that she and Cha Jong-moo were officially dating. And Shim looked happy after hearing this. She had always been glad for her friend, and now Seolha was in a relationship with the man of her dreams. Linking arms, they went off to discuss all the details of this happy event. Min Seolha was happy to share such news with Yoon Shim and glad that now she had a boyfriend, and a wonderful friend who supported her in everything. Meanwhile, at the airport, another man entered this story. Very serious, elegantly dressed, he had just arrived. A little boy ran right into his path, pointing at his shoes. The child tripped over a suitcase wheel and fell to the floor. The blond man took off his sunglasses, not hiding his displeased look, and lowered his gaze to the boy. He twisted his suitcase, adjusting it to pass more conveniently. Without paying any more attention to anyone, he left the boy and his mother, who rushed to pick up her child, behind without a hint of regret. It turned out he was on the phone, talking about Cha Jong-moo and his perfect life. That same evening, they had to hurry to a meeting with director Kim. On the way, Cha Jong-moo asked Min Seolha to order a suit for him. For some reason, the girl blushed when she thought about the suit. The man joked that his secretary had too many perverted thoughts. Cha Jong-moo complained a little that director Kim was getting on his nerves. And after those words, he quietly reached for his beloved's hand, lightly touching it. Of course, Min Seolha pulled her hand away, as someone might see them. The man said she was too cold-hearted. And besides, who would see them except the cameras? So Min Seolha herself looked around, turning her head to check if anyone was nearby. Then she took Cha Jong-moo's hand, saying they would do this only once, so as not to risk it again. The CEO, looking at his beloved, even blushed a little himself. Min Seolha asked if she should drive, since the CEO had said he hadn't slept well. But he refused, reminding her that she didn't have a driver's license. There were only 3 people at the meeting. Min Seolha was working on her laptop, while Cha Jong-moo and director Kim discussed their business. The CEO reminded them that the land purchase issue was supposed to be resolved within this year, but everything was being delayed. In her thoughts, the main character admitted that the other company was being negligent. She was slightly distracted from her work by director Kim, who was sitting across from her. He wasn't exactly doing anything, but kept glancing at Min Seolha very often. The girl really wanted to slap him across the face. Even Cha Jong-moo noticed that she was feeling a bit uncomfortable. The man distracted Kim by asking if he was even listening. Director Kim explained that he was getting old and lately had trouble concentrating. Trying to stay calm, Cha Jong-moo repeated his question. Director Kim said it was difficult to get approval because the area was currently a tourist site. Later, when the meeting ended, the director promised to hurry things up. Glancing at Miss Min, he suggested going for a drink. Director Kim reached out to shake the girl's hand, supposedly to thank her. Instead, the CEO shoved his car keys into her hand and asked her to find his phone. He said he needed to make a call, but his phone was all the way down in the car. The main character nodded and promised to handle it quickly. As Seola left, director Kim said it must be nice to work with such a beauty. He even hinted at something indecent in a veiled way. saying her tied-up hair suited her as it didn't get in the way near her mouth. Cha Jong-moo said Director Kim probably couldn't focus during the meeting because of his secretary. In response, Director Kim mockingly asked if Jung-moo was being so sharp-tongued today because of his secretary. He wanted to tease Cha Jong-moo, but Jung-moo cut him off, saying it was pathetic. The man was about to angrily ask what exactly Jung-moo meant by those words. But suddenly, Cha Jong-moo hit the wall and said that's what he meant, because even from a distance, the cracks were visible. And the fact that his punch left a dent should mean that its foundation was trash. Director Kim was about to add that it was a new wall, but Jong-moo started hitting it again. He said it sounded hollow inside. Director Kim tried to smooth things over, saying there was some misunderstanding between them that needed to be resolved. The CEO smiled and said he was just stating facts, no misunderstanding. Jong-moo even slightly blackmailed Director Kim, not directly, of course, but using a rhetorical question. Meanwhile, Min Sol-ha was coming back without the phone, as it was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, she received a message on her phone. Someone was apologizing for looking at her strangely today. Right after that, the CEO appeared. He explained that he had found the phone. They weren't going for drinks, so he and Min Sol-ha were leaving right away. The CEO didn't explain why the plans had changed, just walked ahead. An angry director, Kim, sat in his office, crumpling a document. The man was irritated that he, Director Kim, had been so shamelessly humiliated. Earlier, General Director Cha said he was expecting the man to apologize to Mrs. Minister. Director Cha Jong-moo ordered that since Kim has Seol-ha's business card, he should apologize first and then delete her contact number. When Director Kim's assistant entered his office, various papers were thrown at him. Director Kim was furious that his assistant, Ha, was nowhere to be found. The man explained that Director Kim himself had ordered Ha to meet the young master. Right after those words, a blonde man who had recently arrived appeared. He entered arrogantly, didn't greet anyone, spoke sarcastically. Later, he picked up a document from the floor. The blonde man, named Jo Tae-gun, settled into a chair opposite Director Kim. It turned out that this blonde man was Director Kim's nephew. They discussed that Jo Tae-gun should behave in a way that the press wouldn't have to constantly cover for him. Looking at the crumpled document, Jo Tae-gun said that the two of them probably had a common unpleasant enemy. And that enemy, of course, was General Director Cha Jong-moo. In the car, the girl noticed that Jung-moo's mood had changed and carefully asked what had happened. The man didn't want to admit that the conflict was because of Seol-ha. Jung-moo said he merely pushed Kim to resolve the issue faster, and Mrs. Min asked whether he had requested an apology from Director Kim. The man explained that it was an important project, and Kim probably considered everything and apologized on his own. The girl wanted to ask for something, to set a condition, but she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. She didn't even manage to finish her sentence, but was very surprised by what she saw. Cha Jong-moo's hand was covered in wounds. Min Seol-ha was frightened, thinking it must have been from punching, and assumed he had beaten Director Kim. After arriving home, she treated Jung-moo's wounds, and he told her the truth. The general director said he had scratched his hand against the corridor walls but hadn't hit anyone. The girl believed him, knowing that Jung-moo wasn't the type to resort to fists. She thought logically that if Kim had been punched, they would either be in the hospital or at the police station. She treated her lover's hand in a way that was slightly painful, to teach him a lesson. However, of course, she didn't want to hurt him, she only said so. The man joked that Seol-ha probably liked beatings or something like that, if she was saying such things. He made jokes about fetishes until Seol-ha smacked him on the ear. Getting up, she put everything away and hoped that no scar would remain after healing. As she was leaving, Jung-moo asked how she was feeling. He was simply worried if she was okay after the situation. She replied that she was fine. She kept silent, but thought to herself that this always happened whenever she wanted to slap that arrogant Kim in the face. Cha Jong-moo apologized and explained that he should have watched over her better when he heard the disgusting rumors about Kim. Seol-ha sat beside him and reassured the man, saying that everything was all right. Cha Jong-moo asked her to speak up right away if she ever felt uncomfortable again. She agreed and said it was time for her to go home. Jong-moo didn't want to let her go, but Seol-ha explained that she had work tomorrow. Cha Jong-moo reminded her that she probably forgot about their agreement. The very one they made in the elevator, to love each other without restrictions. Of course she hadn't forgotten. But Jong-moo suddenly said that tomorrow would be a hard day, so he would drive her home. The girl herself would have preferred to stay, but tomorrow might be difficult. Or maybe not. She caught herself hesitating. She started mumbling something, but the man's hand pulled her by the waist towards him. Jungmoo seated her on his lap, saying he had almost let her go, but she was seducing him. Although in reality, it was the other way around. He was the one seducing her, making her hesitate, but did it really matter? Seola didn't think so. So they simultaneously leaned in for a kiss. Blushing deeply, Seola suddenly asked if she could undress her lover. Jungmoo was just about to give in, thinking he could hold back and let her go, so he was surprised by what he heard. He laughed at his beloved's request, making her even more embarrassed. Jungmoo said he would be more than happy since clothes were unnecessary. Blushing furiously, the girl began unbuttoning his shirt, enjoying even this simple process. She wanted to do it because her partner was insanely handsome and muscular. She had some doubts whether it was a good idea, fearing he might think she was a pervert. Suddenly, he pinned her down on the couch, seemingly unable to hold back anymore. He blushed a little himself, admitting it was easier to control his emotions during meetings than with Seola. And once again, they started kissing passionately, pouring all their desire into the kisses. She didn't manage to fully undress the man, but even with his chest half exposed, he looked damn cool. She didn't manage to fully undress the man, but even with his chest half exposed, he looked damn cool. Every single word like that made the girl's cheeks burn. Seolha also found it very attractive that Jungmoo would ask her before doing anything. Like now, for instance, he said they'd only continue if she agreed. A few days after that, Seolha was sitting at her desk, working. She immersed herself in work to avoid thinking about her beloved. Colleagues passing by thought she was very responsible. They admired her but didn't envy her. Even the CEO sometimes looked at Ms. Min, admiring her. In the elevator, she felt a bit shy and kept her hands to herself. Cha Jung-moo said he really wanted to hold her hand, but Seola reminded him they were at work. Besides, their relationship was only a week old. It was too early to display it so openly. The man said that Romeo and Juliet's love lasted only 5 days, yet it was so intense. Min Seolha explained that was because they fell in love at first sight. The CEO also fell in love at first sight. Even Director Kim could confirm that. The girl found it hard to believe, since he used to be rude and even called them ugly once. The CEO explained that he simply didn't know how to handle his feelings back then. But now he was determined to build a serious relationship with Min Seol-ha. He confessed that he was working on himself to become a better man for her. While talking, Seol-ha didn't even notice when they started holding hands. He asked her not to leave him hanging, and in return, he would restrain himself from touching her at the office. Seol-ha said she really wasn't planning on leaving him. Before leaving, the girl reminded him about the meeting in Incheon scheduled for the next day. Suddenly, Cha Jung-moo stopped, not even stepping out of the elevator. Looking at someone with surprised eyes, he asked why that person was here. It was a distinguished older woman dressed in luxurious clothes. Soon they were having tea. The one Seola had chosen turned out to be very much to the lady's taste. The woman asked Jung-moo to at least smile. They hadn't seen each other for 2 years. The man pointed out it had been 2 years, even though she had moved to the USA 3 years ago. Jung-moo explained that his friend's wedding was a year after her move. The lady clapped her hands, remembering her son was indeed at that wedding. Jung-moo believed she simply hadn't noticed him and didn't care, though she always hid behind her old age as an excuse. They also briefly talked about the director's health. Finally, Cha Jung-moo asked why his mother had come back to Korea so suddenly. Putting her teacup on the table, she replied that it was obvious. In a few days, there would be an important day for them because something had happened years ago. The woman didn't want to delve into details again, as it was too painful. But the man still didn't understand. All these years, his mother had been indifferent. So why had she suddenly come back, pretending otherwise? The mother clasped her hands, not even denying her son's words. Looking out the window, she admitted that she had dreamt of that girl. The girl was in tears. It even seemed that mysterious girl wanted to say something, but couldn't. The woman asked if Jung-moo was still angry with her. She understood that Jung-moo and the girl had been close. But she, the mother, had grieved too. Sitting in the chair, Seolha was pondering over the CEO's reaction. She had entered the office just to bring them tea. But Cha Jung-moo told her to return to her work. And he definitely looked sad. She smiled one last time, pretending she hadn't noticed anything, and left. But she was bothered by the gloomy atmosphere there. A phone call pulled her out of her thoughts. She quickly picked up. Only what she heard sounded a little sad. The girl suspected that Mr. Cha had another migraine, even though he had recently taken his medicine. She brought him verbena tea, explaining that it helps with migraines. She also brought the medicine he had asked for over the phone, but reminded him that he had taken it not long ago. Seola apologized to the lady for interrupting their conversation, but the woman turned out to be kind and told her not to worry. Then Seolha handed the medicine to the CEO, asking him to wait before taking it. The girl apologized once more, bowed, and left. She didn't really want to stay there, fearing she might disturb their conversation. She thought she would handle it better, but she felt awkward in front of Jungmu's mother. And the office felt gloomy, clearly indicating she wasn't welcome there. But Minsela only hoped that Jungmu wouldn't take too many pills. For a while, the CEO hesitated whether to take the pills. His mother remarked that he seemed to have frequent headaches. Jungmu explained that it was normal, as he was constantly busy with work. The woman also noted that when Miss Min entered, he seemed to relax a little. She admitted it was unusual for her son to be interested in someone. His mother said she liked Seolha. She seemed like a good person. Turning the pills in his hands, he eventually put them down on the table. He told his mother that Seolha was actually too good for him. Sitting at home, Seolha worried whether Jungmu was okay. He never showed emotions, even in terrible situations, but today he looked gloomy. It saddened her to even think that something might have happened to Jungmu. Eun Shim noticed her friend's sadness. She was staying at Seolha's place because of heating problems and teased her a little. Eun Shim hugged her tightly, saying she was really happy about her relationship with Cha Jungmu. They were both distracted by an urgent message saying there was a snowstorm outside, blocking the roads. Eun Shim immediately got up while Seolha's expression darkened slightly upon hearing this. Eun Shim said she couldn't stand wrapping herself in layers of clothing and preferred warmth. And Seolha, lowering her gaze, agreed. That time of year had come again, the one that had divided her life into before and after a few years ago. Meanwhile, her beloved wasn't feeling any better, and it was a sad time for him too. His mother had previously suggested they visit that special place together. He also remembered someone mentioning that the mysterious girl used to cry in her sleep. Jungmu couldn't understand why she was crying. What did she want to say? It turned out that many years ago, a man had hit that girl with a car and left her there while she was still alive. That man was Min Seolha's father, although they didn't know about it. That's one of the reasons why he always drives himself and never lets anyone else take the wheel. He couldn't stop wondering what she would have told him. What did she want to say while crying? Maybe she was upset because last time only he visited her? Suddenly, he felt the urge to call someone. Someone answered his call, smiling at how things were unfolding. But for the first few seconds, Jungmu couldn't utter a single word. Exhaling, Cha Jungmu said that he really wanted to talk to his father. The man had no time on weekends because he was going to play golf to discuss business. His father suggested he join him to get involved in the business affairs. But Jungmu showed no interest, as he already had plans that couldn't be canceled. Cha Jungmu explained to his father that he wished they would at least call each other more often. But his father told him to review a document instead and hung up. Cha Jungmu sighed, taking the phone away from his ear. Could it be that his father had already forgotten about her? The next day, Seolha was working on her laptop while some of her colleagues discussed the company's anniversary and the day off they would get for it. They also asked Ms. Min about her plans. A tired Solha simply replied, to get some sleep. She really needed to sleep. Seeing how sleepy Seolha was, the girls even gave her their vitamin drink. In Seolha's opinion, Jungmu seemed very gloomy whenever she saw him. Today, he barely spoke, didn't tease her, and made no jokes at all. Seolha wasn't sure if she should ask him why he was in a bad mood. Instead, he told her that she looked tired and asked if she was okay. That vitamin drink had helped a little, so she answered that everything was great. Jungmu told her she could go home by herself since he had a lot of work to do. Together with Eun Shim, who was thrilled about the upcoming day off, Seolha slowly dragged herself home. She was troubled by the fact that she hadn't asked how he was doing or what had happened, and now she was even more worried. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks. Eun Shim turned back to her friend, and Seolha immediately apologized. Clutching her bag, she said she needed to go back to Director Cha. Eun Shim crossed her arms and said she knew it, that Seolha wouldn't go home this early. But there was nothing to apologize for, and the girl could calmly go see her beloved. While Cha Jungmu was working, his head started to ache, so he lay down for a bit. Without even noticing, Cha Jungmu fell asleep. He dreamed of the same girl. She had called him a few years ago to tell him that she finally had her Rudolph. Cha Jung-moo said that was good, as she had talked about that toy all year long. She looked at the gift with satisfaction, smiling and blushing slightly from the cold. Jung-moo couldn't join her then because he had a meeting. But through the phone, he heard a loud crash, got scared, and asked if everything was okay. But Hyun-young never answered him again. Those memories, which had turned into a dream, were his worst nightmare, from which he woke up. It was unbearable to recall that damn day when the girl passed away. The voice of Min Seol-ha calling him finally woke him up completely. At last, she anxiously asked if the director was all right. The man didn't answer right away. He pulled her by the waist and hugged her. The girl hugged him back, and after calming down a little, Jung-moo asked why she was here. Min Seol-ha explained that she wanted to wait for Mr. Cha. Cha Jung-moo noticed a coat draped over his leg, picked it up with his hand, and was surprised. It turned out that Min Seol-ha thought he might be cold and covered him. She said that Jung-moo could open up about what was bothering him, and she would support him in any way she could. The man thought that his mother's visit must have left her feeling uneasy. He explained that he was just a bit sensitive, that's all. And then the old Jung-moo appeared again. He grabbed her hand and said he would never let go until death. Seol-ha blushed, and Jung-moo asked if she had any plans for the evening. Logically, she didn't, since she had come back here just to wait for him. The man draped a coat over Seol-ha and said that work could wait. They had other plans. At home, the first thing he did was change clothes and decided they needed to eat. He picked out his smallest clothes for Seol-ha to change into. Ms. Min felt a little awkward as she entered the kitchen. As she walked in, she said the clothes hung a bit loosely, but they were comfortable enough. The man said that was good and quickly turned away, blushing madly. Seol-ha settled at the table, looking around. She admitted to herself that her beloved's place was much cleaner than hers. Meanwhile, Jung-moo placed 2 servings of shrimp pasta on the table. Min Seol-ha said she even felt a little embarrassed, but she was hungry. Besides, the food made by this man was really good. He smiled and wished her a good meal. Later, the two of them decided it would be a good idea to watch a movie. Min Seol-ha was thrilled, even though it was a horror movie. She loved films and commented a lot. Getting caught up in it, she slightly squeezed Cha Jung-moo's leg. Realizing it, she became embarrassed and immediately withdrew her hand. Jung-moo joked that if she just wanted to touch him, she could have just said so. He even grabbed her hand again and pulled her closer. He placed her hand on his leg and said he liked it when she touched him. Min Seol-ha was completely flustered when Jung-moo, pretending to be upset, asked if she was planning to avoid physical contact altogether. Looking at his beloved's face, he teased her, saying that if she didn't want to, he wouldn't force her. But Min Seol-ha objected, saying she didn't mean it that way, and that he was making things up. Hinting at a more physical continuation of the conversation, the man asked if it was okay if they didn't finish the movie. She said it was fine, and once the TV was turned off, she moved closer and kissed Jung-moo on the cheek. Jung-moo held the girl by the chin, admiring her beauty. Yes, this was truly love. As they kissed, they leaned into each other at the same time, making their hearts race wildly. During the kiss, Seol-ha climbed onto her lover's lap, giving him more opportunities to touch her. The girl trembled at every touch and kiss. No matter how many times they did this, he always drove her crazy. The next morning, tired and thirsty, the girl stood in the kitchen drinking water. Behind her, Cha Jung-moo stood close, hugging her tightly. Min Seol-ha couldn't even move. Her beloved was hugging her so tightly. He explained that she herself had said her back hurt after last night, and it was her fault for wanting to be on top. The girl turned to Jung-moo and covered his mouth with her hand, saying that wasn't how it happened. After she removed her hand, the man smirked boldly and asked if she enjoyed touching his body. Min Seol-ha blushed and said that he was teasing her again. Eventually, the general director let her go and asked if she wanted to take a shower. The girl then asked if she would be showering alone. Cha Jung-moo replied that of course he'd gladly join her, but he wasn't sure he could hold back with his beloved nearby. He admitted he had only just calmed down a little, but if his lover insisted, he couldn't say no. Seol-ha replied that it wasn't necessary. She really couldn't continue any further. But Cha Jung-moo smiled and promised he wouldn't bite her. Instead, they would just cuddle a lot, so there was nothing to worry about. The man asked Seol-ha to wait a little while he ran the bath for them. The girl asked if he was going to do it himself. Jung-moo answered that of course he would. He wouldn't let her lift a finger in his house since she already took care of him at work. That was nice to hear. Seola blushed slightly and went to wait. A little later, they were both sitting in the spacious bathtub, which Seolha thought was romantic. Jungmoo held her and thanked her for being such a wonderful person in his life. The girl, of course, was also grateful to now have such a wonderful boyfriend. Jungmoo gently turned Min Seolha's flushed face toward him, and the two of them reached out for a soft, tender kiss. A little later, when the man began caressing Seolha, she made a strange sound that made him laugh. She hid her face, mumbling that she was really embarrassed now, and it wasn't funny at all. Besides, she said he had worn her out, and that's why she reacted that way. So it was Jungmoo's fault. But the man believed it was Seolha's fault. She was just too beautiful not to touch. The girl blushed again and said, "There you go again with your jokes and compliments." After some time, they finally got out of the bath and the girl changed into a t-shirt. She was distracted by a ringing sound. It seemed someone was calling. She picked up the phone and it turned out to be Director Park. She was replying to him while rummaging through her bag. A few things fell out of it, including the snowman toy. She was still on the phone and couldn't pick them up, so Cha Jung-moo approached her. The man bent down to pick up the scattered items and noticed the toy from his dream with Hyun Young. He froze, staring at the painfully familiar object. Even Min Solha was surprised at how Cha Jung-moo froze while looking at the toy. Still holding it, he didn't even notice that Solha had finished her phone call. It was Seolha who brought him back to reality by asking if everything was all right. And only then did Jung-moo straighten up. He put the figure into a box and said he hadn't expected that she liked toys from that company. Min Seolha replied that she too was surprised he knew about them since they weren't very popular. She admitted that she buys them every winter around this time of year. She answered Jungmoo's question about whether she was looking for someone specific by saying she was looking for Rudolph the reindeer. The man's expression suddenly changed as he asked why Rudolph in particular. Min Seolha said she simply thought that toy was the cutest. And just like that, the topic was closed. They didn't talk about it again. Sometime later, they were already at work, and a slightly nervous Jungmoo was sitting in his chair. He couldn't get that situation or the snowman out of his head. He truly hadn't expected to find that toy from that company with his beloved. Just as he let out a heavy sigh and leaned back in his chair, someone called. At first, Cha Jung-moo answered formally, thinking it was a work-related call. But no, it was his mother. She wanted to cook something and called to ask what he would like. Jung-moo said it wasn't necessary. He could feed himself. He also asked her not to buy everything on sale since he had given her his credit card. But it was already a habit of hers, and non-sale groceries were expensive. Jung-moo said he'd visit on the weekend and was about to hang up. But his mother stopped him and said she would fry anchovies before he arrived. That was Hyun Young's favorite dish, but Jung-moo didn't say anything. He just asked her not to cook anything. Then he finally hung up and exhaled heavily. It was a hard time for him. Meanwhile, Cho Tae-gun went shopping. It seemed like he had decided to buy out every possible store as his assistant's hands were full of bags. Everyone around noticed this incredibly handsome man, but he paid no attention to anyone. Like a model, he just walked into yet another store. But near the counter, he noticed a very familiar figure. It turned out Min Solha was in that store too, picking out a tie. The sales assistant was showing her two ties that were all the rage this season. Min Solha imagined her boyfriend in a black tie with gray stripes, and also imagined him in a red patterned tie. In her mind, both accessories suited Jungmoo perfectly. From her own imagination, Min Solha turned as red as a tomato. While examining the ties, she wondered whether this would be a good birthday gift at all. She remembered how Cha Jung-moo had once asked her to return all the gifts. He explained it by saying that if he accepted even one, they'd never leave him alone afterward. That's why she never dared to give him what she had intended back then. She felt sad that she had never given him anything because of his decision not to accept gifts from coworkers. But now they weren't just coworkers. She was his girlfriend, so she had every right to prepare a gift. Jo Tae-gun had been watching all of this for a while, and the sales assistant asked if he needed anything. Walking up, he asked if the lady was picking a gift for her boyfriend. At that moment, the girl's phone rang. It was Yoon Shim. Looking at the phone, she thought her friend had probably finished work. She ignored the blonde man and told the consultant that she would definitely come back later. The blonde man raised an eyebrow and smiled slightly. That was unexpected. The girls met at an outdoor table and decided to have coffee together. It was clear that today had not been an easy day for Yoon Shim. Nevertheless, she had seen a very handsome guy. and just remembering him made her blush. It turned out that it was Jo Tae-gun. Yoon Shim explained which company he was from, and the main heroine turned pale. It turned out that the rumors about Cha Jong-moo's wedding referred to a girl from the same company as Jo Tae-gun. Yoon Shim, seeing her friend's face, explained that it wasn't about the rumored wedding. She said that Jo Tae-gun had come to buy a limited edition watch. And while buying the watch, he enchanted the entire store, including Yoon Shim. Her friend compared Jo Tae-gun's looks to Cha Jong-moo's, saying he was even better looking. But Min Seol-ha disagreed and said Cha Jong-moo was the most handsome man in the world. A male voice asked if Seol-ha really thought so. The girl crossed her arms and said of course she did. Then she realized that it was Cha Jong-moo himself, and he had totally caught her. Eun Shim and Cha Jong-moo also formally greeted each other. The man said he came to pick up his beloved because when she's with Ms. Lee, no one can get through to her. Seol-ha apologized and started looking for her phone. Meanwhile, Eun Shim and her coffee had already vanished. Neither Young-moo nor Seol-ha noticed it. The man said he owed Ms. Lee a thank you for giving them a little time for a walk. But during the walk, the girl wouldn't let him hold her hand, let alone kiss her. She even walked a few steps ahead to make sure Young-moo didn't try anything. Meanwhile, the man asked Ms. Min not to schedule anything for him over the weekend due to personal matters. He explained to the girl, as his beloved, that he had a meeting with his mother. Jung-moo said they hadn't seen each other in a long time, and it would feel wrong not to spend time with her at all. Now Seol-ha understood why the man had seemed uncomfortable before. They talked for a bit more, casually and without any formalities. Meanwhile, someone who was watching them took a photo of Jung-moo and Seol-ha. It was a man. He smiled maliciously, clearly plotting something. Of course, there were always people who loved to poke their noses into other people's business. A little later, that photo was sent to Jo Tae-gun's phone. He recognized both Cha Jong-moo and the same Ms. Min he had seen earlier at the store. His smile became disturbingly wicked when he realized he knew the woman who was likely in a relationship with Cha Jong-moo. The next day, Cha Jong-moo was sitting in his office, filling out some documents. When he wanted to sign the document, his pen ran out of ink. Putting the pen aside, the man leaned back, adjusted his hair, and sighed heavily. Nearby, there was a calendar, and Jung-moo's gaze accidentally landed on it. It turned out that the weekend was very close. That thought weighed heavily on him, and his chest felt tight. Min Seol-ha was also working at her desk, but on a computer rather than paperwork. She was distracted by Cha Jong-moo, who explained that his pen had just run out of ink. He said he really liked these pens, but didn't want to burden Ms. Min. He just asked where she got them, and he'd buy them himself. But according to Min Seol-ha, no one needed to go anywhere. She had already anticipated it long ago. Apparently, she had noticed that he liked using that pen, so she bought a few and brought them to Jong-moo. He sincerely thanked Ms. Min, saying he was happy to see his beloved, despite how busy she was. But Seol-ha, blushing, reminded him not to look at her like that or give compliments while they were at work. But Cha Jong-moo said that if it were up to him, he'd take his beloved and fly home with her right now to spend time together. Min Seol-ha broke out of his embrace, saying she had something very urgent to do and had to run. And she did. Cha Jong-moo was pleased that Seol-ha blushed so deeply. He himself was a little shy too, and his cheeks flushed when spending time with his beloved. Walking out the door, the main heroine whispered to herself that they needed to be more careful at work. Her attention was drawn by a few colleagues who were once again loudly discussing something. The brunette said she had heard that their CEO would be having dinner this week with his fiancée and their parents. Upon hearing this, Min Seol-ha turned pale. Those were terrifying words for her. Moreover, Cha Jong-moo had previously told her that it was just a rumor, that he didn't have any fiancé or anything like that. Seol-ha thought that she should have asked him directly about it and had a serious talk instead of tormenting herself now. But she decided that she should trust the man she loved. He did have personal plans for the weekend, and she also had her own things to do. The next morning, they had breakfast together with Yoon Shim. Her friend said she had gotten up early to meet Seol-ha, but the girl had already done everything by herself. Seol-ha said she didn't want to bother her friend. But she was very grateful to Yoon Shim for always caring about her. Sitting at the table, she once again remembered the day of her father's trial. That day, the prosecutor showed her father a toy that the victim was carrying home. He said the girl had searched for it for a long time, but now Rudolph was broken due to the accident. Seol-ha's father looked at the toy but couldn't recognize it at all. He said he remembered nothing at all. This made Min Seol-ha shudder in her seat. She started crying then, unable to understand how such a thing could have happened, refusing to believe her father could have done that. Since then, every year she visited the girl her father had hit with the car. She did this a year before the anniversary of the accident to avoid running into the girl's relatives. It was hard to say if she was doing the right thing by going there, but she simply couldn't abandon that girl. She couldn't get the image of the broken Rudolph toy out of her mind. So each year she brought flowers and the same toy she received in a gift. It would be wrong to forget the person who died because of her father. Eun Shim changed the topic and asked whether Min Seol-ha had talked to Jong-moo about the wedding rumors. Seol-ha said no. Then Eun Shim shared that she didn't think the CEO was seeing anyone. And actually, Seol-ha was the first one to meet his parents. His mother, to be exact. Eun Shim said that in any case, it would be better for the CEO not to hurt her friend. Or else. Then Eun Shim, looking at her phone, suggested they go to an important event at a luxurious hotel. She explained that the entrance was free in honor of the 50th anniversary. The next day, they actually managed to attend the event. Moreover, CEO Jong-moo was also present at the hotel. There were so many people around that he thought running a hotel business might be a great idea. But his peace of mind was suddenly disturbed by a girl he recognized. They hadn't seen each other since they graduated from college. That had been a long time ago. Blushing, the girl said she missed Jong-moo very much and asked how he was doing. The CEO didn't really want to talk to her, but it wouldn't be polite to just turn away. However, from his perspective, the girl was being far too touchy. This rather unpleasant scene was witnessed by Min Seol-ha, who was passing by with Eun Shim. It was the same girl from the article. She was also from the same company as Jo Tae-gun. This made the girl think that the rumors were probably true. Turning to her friend, Min Seol-ha said she needed to stop by the restroom before they continued. She decided to talk about it later because right now she was here to have fun with Eun Shim. Her friend, rummaging through her bag, was waiting outside the restroom. Meanwhile, Jo Tae-gun was looking for Jo Kang-hee, his sister who had dragged him here and then disappeared. Suddenly, a small lip balm rolled to his foot. It had fallen out of Eun Shim's bag. The man looked at the item with such irritation as if it were some kind of insult rather than an accident. When he kicked the lip balm away, an annoyed voice rang out behind him. It was Eun Shim. She scolded him, saying he could have just picked it up instead of kicking it like a brute. Jo Tae-gun turned and said it was her fault for dropping it in the first place. When their eyes met, they recognized each other. Only Eun Shim couldn't believe a guy with such looks could behave so rudely. Jo Tae-gun probably regretted it too when he saw the familiar and incredibly beautiful face before him. Smiling, he said that if he had upset her, he was willing to apologize. And he handed her his business card, saying she could call him if she wanted that apology. Eun Shim was surprised by what she heard. Just a moment ago, this man had been rude. So what was this now? Why would she even need that business card? Meanwhile, the blonde man looked completely confident in himself. He even waited a few seconds for the girl to accept that little piece of cardboard. Eun Shim stood up and said that she didn't need the business card, that everything was fine, and she wasn't asking for any compensation. But that arrogant man just shoved the card between her fingers. And before she had a chance to process what had just happened, he quickly left, saying that if she didn't need compensation, she could call when she needed something else. Left alone, she looked down at the card, thinking how strange this whole situation was. It felt like a scene from a drama. She had heard many different rumors about this man before. Most of all, people talked about his skills as a good businessman. And as she recalled, someone once said that his success came from being stubborn as a mule. No one could stop him. Eun Shim put the card in her bag and thought, even if a person is a master of their craft, if their character is rotten, nothing good will come of it. She was about to leave when Min Sola caught up with her and asked where she was going, leaving her friend alone in the bathroom. It turned out the girl had just been lost in thought and didn't even realize she had forgotten about her friend. Min Seola didn't think it was a big deal, and the two of them went off to enjoy the celebration together. In the bathroom, the girl had already calmed herself down. She decided not to ruin the evening with a bad mood and to forget about it for now. Meanwhile, Jong-moo's acquaintance was feeling more relaxed. She reached for his shoulder, saying something was on it and needed to be brushed off. She looked like something really was there, but in reality, it was just an excuse to touch the man. At some point, the man asked her to stop because rumors were already spreading around the hall. People had eyes and loved to gossip. Smiling, the girl said Jong-moo was still very popular and at the center of many rumors. The acquaintance, blushing slightly, said it was fine if rumors spread about them. She actually liked the idea. The man turned his head and replied that this wasn't right. His distant attitude surprised the girl, and she asked if that meant he had a girlfriend. His behavior suggested it, but even back in school, he never looked at anyone. Jongmu said nothing. He exhaled and turned his gaze away from the girl. Everyone always wanted to know everything about him. Glancing at his watch, he said it was time for his meeting and he had to go. Still, the acquaintance tried to ask him out to eat another day, but the man interrupted her. He said he already had someone he loved, so there likely wouldn't be a next time. He said a reserved goodbye and left the girl standing in the crowd with her thoughts as he went looking for his mother. She felt a little hurt to be rejected. It was hard to believe that Jongmu, someone she'd known for a long time, had already found someone else. But the man immediately forgot about the conversation. He had more on his mind. He was thinking about what his sister might have looked like if she were still alive. So much time had passed, 10 whole years, and yet the pain in his chest was still unbearable. When he met up with his mother, Jongmu saw that she had brought a whole pile of bags. She had bought some nuts because she heard they helped with migraines and even grabbed a few dietary supplements. She must have really missed him. She'd even brought clothes just in case her son got cold on the way to work. Surprisingly, she even had a gift for Min Seola, and she gave it with such an innocent expression, as if giving presents to his secretary were completely normal. She explained that, as a mother, she could clearly see that the relationship between Jongmu and Miss Min went deeper than just professional. Both the tea Min Seola had made and the girl herself seemed very pleasant to the mother. Jongmu felt a bit embarrassed that his mother knew everything. He took the bag from her hands and said they needed to hurry. At Hyun Young's grave, the mother explained that she had bought so many things because she had never been there before. She admitted that none of it was really necessary. Just one thing would have been enough, since her daughter wouldn't be able to use any of it now anyway. It was hard for Jongmu, too. He usually came alone, but with his mother there, he felt so vulnerable that he could have cried right then and there. The mother turned to her son and apologized for putting everything on him while she had walked away. She didn't want to abandon him, but losing her daughter had hit her so hard that she had avoided the grave all this time, just so she wouldn't have to believe it was real. Jongmu, stammering a little, said that he shouldn't have let his sister go alone that day. If only he had been there, things would have turned out differently. The mother knew her son had been blaming himself all these years for not protecting her, but she had never tried to comfort him, and so he had kept living like that. That's why, here at Hyunyoung's grave, she finally said it wasn't his fault. Those words made the usually cold and unapproachable Jongmu burst into tears, and his mother began to comfort him. It had gotten dark outside, so after some time, they headed home. The man picked up a bag someone had left at the grave and placed it in front of him. It was his mother who had noticed the bag first, unaware that these toys had been appearing at the grave every year. She asked if it was her son who left them or perhaps a friend of Hyunyeon's. After all, no one else knew how much the girl had loved those toys. But he didn't know either. He had just accepted the fact that someone out there cared enough to bring toys to the grave every year. The toys were different each year, but this time the anonymous person had hit the mark. That little snowman was the exact toy his sister had that day. Jongmu recalled that he had recently seen the same toy with Min Seola. Of course, he told himself it was just a coincidence. He never imagined things would turn out like this. But his thoughts were interrupted by his phone vibrating. His mother had sent a message. She thanked him for being there, as it had been very difficult for her to show up. After a brief hesitation, Jongmu offered to have a meal together with his mother later. The woman smiled at his message. She knew her son felt awkward, but that's just how he was. Loving and somewhat shy. That day, the workday at their office began with a round inspection. The CEO wanted to check if everything was in order. He asked employees if there were any complaints about colleagues, as there had been past initiatives to improve this area. He also inquired about sanitary standards, whether everything was fine in that regard, and even inspected a few places himself. Although the CEO could have just asked Min Seolha or Eun Shim, he preferred to walk around and ask everyone directly if things were going well. Fortunately, incidents were rare there, and today's inspection confirmed it. Everything was perfect. During the inspection, the main heroine was lost in thought. Ever since seeing her lover with another woman at the party, she hadn't been able to sleep and kept worrying about it. Min Seola was so troubled that she considered writing a resignation letter again, but that wouldn't help. The best option was to talk to Jongmu. He, coincidentally, was the one who snapped her out of her thoughts by addressing her. First, Jongmu asked if she was okay, and after she replied that she was fine, he immediately asked if she was free that evening. For some reason, the girl immediately thought he wanted to meet to talk about his marriage. Even Jongmu noticed that she was clearly nervous. But their conversation was interrupted by one of the employees, who also looked concerned as he approached the CEO. It turned out they had a guest that day, an unwelcome one, which explained the employee's discomfort. Jungmoo, too, was quite surprised to hear that Jo Tae-gun had shown up and was already waiting for him. The CEO entered the room where Jo Tae-gun was waiting. Min Seola brought a cup of tea for each of them and then left so as not to interfere. Jungmoo told the guest that he didn't recall them having a scheduled meeting that day. The suddenness had caught him off guard. The blonde man, picking up his cup of tea, said that he didn't need a spot on the schedule to want to see an old friend. Jungmoo hadn't even had a sip of his tea before Jo Tae-gun said that they could very well become relatives. The blonde caught the confused look on the man's face and clarified that his Kang-hee was quite a sweet girl. Though yes, with a strong personality. Jungmoo even smiled. Looking away, he said he never imagined they were so close that Jo Tae-gun would play matchmaker. The blonde explained that he had seen how upset Kang-hee looked back at the hotel and even asked if they had considered a serious relationship. After hearing that the blonde wanted to help his sister, Jungmoo kept a sharp eye on the sly fox, trying to figure out where this was going. Jo Tae-gun got to his point. He began by saying it would be beneficial for both sides and ended by asking if there was any reason they couldn't make it happen. At first, Jungmoo said nothing. Then the blonde struck. He asked if his friend was reacting so negatively because of his secretary Min. The guy really wanted to at least see a flustered expression on Jungmoo's face, just to enjoy it. CEO Cha replied that he had indeed noticed the guest's keen interest in Ms. Min, but Min Seolha was already in a relationship, said the CEO, then elegantly sipped his tea. Apart from a slight smile, he showed no emotion. Jo Tae-gun wasn't surprised. That man had always been the same since their school days, reserved, blunt, and mysterious. After a while, he was already on his way out of the office. They had offered him a tour, but he declined. He had come to talk to Jungmoo, to see his reaction, to tease him a bit. But nothing had changed since those old days. Back then, Jungmoo never let the blonde man outdo him. And that still hadn't changed. But now Jo Tae-gun had a plan. And if his old friend had refused to become family, then that plan would go into action. His attention was caught by Secretary Min, who was smiling and rushing off somewhere. It turned out the heroine was hurrying to her friend, and from their conversation, the blonde learned that she had brought berries for a colleague. And Jo Tae-gun recognized that colleague, the same one he had run into at the party. He couldn't deny that this Eunshim was incredibly beautiful. She fit his type of woman perfectly. Meanwhile, Eunshim thanked her friend for the strawberries she had brought. It was a sweet gesture from Min Seola. They chatted a bit. Seola mentioned that evening, Jungmoo had invited her to dinner. She was still a little anxious because earlier that day, the head of the Taekong group had visited. That was the same group that, according to rumors, Jungmoo's fiancé was supposed to come from. Her friend snapped her out of her worries by grabbing her hands. Eunshim noticed her friend was in a strange mood and asked her to speak up if something was really bothering her. Because Min Seolha's honesty is what makes her genuine, and even in a way attractive. That evening, they really did go to a restaurant, but Min Seolha couldn't say a word. On top of that, she was starving and spent the whole evening quietly chewing. Cha Jungmoo looked up at her right when she ended up choking on a piece of food, lost in her thoughts. He could tell that Min Seolha was worried, that she wanted to talk, but couldn't bring herself to do it. At first, he honestly didn't want to pressure her. He didn't want to intrude or interrogate her, but he was starting to worry too. A little later, when they were walking down the street in silence, both awkwardly quiet, they knew someone had to speak first. But Min Seolha just couldn't. Every time she tried to say something, her heart began pounding wildly with fear. She didn't want to hear the worst. Then Jungmoo took matters into his own hands. He turned his head slightly toward his beloved and addressed her. First, the man apologized, but then he paused briefly, as if searching for the right words. Min Seolha turned pale. Cha Jungmoo stopped and turned to Min Seolha. He said she was probably troubled by the rumors still circulating about his engagement. At first, he didn't pay them any attention, but too many people had misunderstood the situation, including Min Seolha. That's why he decided to tell her what he had actually been doing during the days they didn't see each other. After hesitating a bit, Jungmoo explained that he and his mother had gone to visit his younger sister. He admitted honestly that they had gone to the cemetery. He usually went alone, but this time his mother had gone with him. At first, Min Seolha was overwhelmed with emotions, conflicting and intense, that hit her like a heavy weight after hearing his words. She instinctively reached out to embrace him. At first, she felt relieved. He wasn't leaving her. He wasn't getting married. Everything between them was fine. Then came the guilt. She had suspected that this man might be lying to her, while in reality he had been dealing with such grief. Jung-moo held her tightly, telling her everything was okay. She had just been worried, anxious, and scared. It wasn't her fault that she didn't know. Pulling away slightly, she said she felt guilty because if she had spoken earlier, they wouldn't have touched on such a painful topic for him. Then Cha Jung-moo hugged Seola again and promised that he would make an effort to prevent such misunderstandings from happening in the future. That evening, they didn't part for a long time. It wasn't a night filled with passion, but something much deeper. A conversation about Cha Jung-moo. Min Seola learned a lot. About his life with his mother, his school years, his childhood. That night, not just their bodies, but their souls drew closer. Quietly, almost shyly, touching one another. The next day, some colleagues walking through the office were chatting about their much-anticipated weekend plans. As before, they turned to the main heroine to say or ask her something. But they said nothing. As soon as Min Seolha looked up at them, they flinched. Her eyes were so red and swollen that one girl thought someone had deeply hurt her. And she'd been crying, while another assumed the secretary had fallen ill. A bit later, the girl brought in reports for next week's meeting. At first, the man focused only on the documents, but out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something was wrong with his beloved and looked at her. Putting the documents aside, Jung-moo touched her face and said her eyes were very puffy, even though she had used a compress. He reminded her that he had asked her several times to stop crying, but Min Sola admitted that once she starts, it's hard to stop. She was about to leave, but the man stopped her. Then he wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her into an embrace, saying that at that moment, it wasn't the documents he needed, it was his Min Soha. Jung-moo said it was lunchtime, they had a break, so they could close the door and be alone. But they never did, because Jung-moo could be so mischievous. He sat on the table, pulled his beloved close, and made her blush with his flirty talk. And because they hadn't closed the door, someone ended up interrupting their alone time. It was a man, one of the employees. The department head was nowhere to be found, so he came to personally ask the general director whether the report had arrived. Cha Jung-moo replied that he would definitely check, but a bit later, he was currently busy. When someone began approaching the door to his office, Min Seola couldn't think of anything better than to hide behind the general director's back. Fortunately, he was large enough to completely shield her. After the employee left the office, Seola stepped out from behind her lover's back and said that was way too close. After that, Cha Jung-moo asked if she was free this weekend. Min Seola thought for a moment, checking if she had anything planned, and realized she was free. Director Cha said he had completed most of his work in advance to free up his weekend. And all of it was for the sake of spending more time with his beloved, because they still had so many things to do together. The girl thought this man was incredible. Give him even a small chance and he'd definitely flirt. So at first, she swatted his hand away, then suddenly grabbed his tie. Pushing the general director further onto the table, she leaned in and said that he was tempting her too much. She threatened that if he kept it up, they wouldn't kiss. That was her idea of punishment. The way she seduced him this time made Jung-moo blush as well, and he was about to say something. But there was no one left to say it to. Min Seola had already vanished, though just moments ago she'd been hovering over him, teasing him. The girl was already at the door. As she opened it, she told him they'd meet up again later. It was such a surprising and pleasant moment for the general director that he needed a few minutes to calm his wildly beating heart. And Min Seola was completely pleased with herself. She knew how to flirt too, and when she did, she always made her lover blush. Leaving the office, Seola noticed that they had a visitor. A few employees were gathered around someone. This caught her attention because the man's face looked strangely familiar. And that man, as if sensing her gaze, suddenly turned his head directly toward her, throwing her off. Min Seola felt that the situation was strange and decided that instead of standing there staring at some man, she'd better go back to her own work. But now the man was looking directly at the heroine, not averting his gaze until she disappeared from sight. Meanwhile, in his office, Jo Tae-gun was trying to go through some documents, focus, and get some work done. But someone clearly didn't want to let him do that. So the blonde eventually put the documents aside and asked how long all of this was going to continue. You'd think his sister was just sitting quietly on the couch. No noise, nothing. But even the mere fact of her sadness weighed down the atmosphere in the room. Eventually, she asked what kind of girl General Director Cha Jung-moo had, the one who had captured his heart. Jo Tae-gun, who actually knew Jung-moo's girlfriend, said she was much prettier than his sister. The girl snapped that to the blonde. All girls were pretty. If he could, he'd spend all day just staring at them. Jo Tae-gun smugly agreed, saying you couldn't argue with that, but added that it wasn't really about his sister at all. The blonde said that if his sister was so curious to see the girl, then the two of them should visit Jungwoo's company together next time. His sister asked him to keep everything clean and above board, and then, just before leaving the office, asked him to stop taking the pills. The man pulled the same documents back toward him, didn't answer his sister, and simply smiled. His smile looked so sinister that it was clear he was up to something. It was nighttime when Min Se-olha lay down in bed, but she couldn't fall asleep and kept tossing and turning, trying to find a comfortable position. The problem was that she and Jungwoo had planned a trip, and while that should have been fine, she'd even hurriedly sketched a quick plan. It still made her nervous. Suddenly, her phone, lying beside her, started vibrating. Someone was calling the girl rather late at night. Min Se-olha sat up, picked up the phone, and answered. It was Cha Jung-moo calling. He first asked if he'd accidentally woken her, but she quickly replied that she hadn't been asleep. She just couldn't fall asleep. And admitted she was curious why he was calling so late. The general director needed just 2 words to explain the reason for his call. He missed Min Se-olha and thought they could talk on the phone for a bit. He shared that he was feeling a little nervous about tomorrow. He could hardly wait to not only see his beloved, but also spend the entire day with her. Cha Jung-moo said he couldn't stop thinking about her, so maybe he should just move in and spend every minute together. Then, quite suddenly, Min Se-olha offered to come over right now, which even surprised Jung-moo. She explained that it would be better if she went to him, since there was nowhere to park near her place and she didn't want him to drive while tired. She worried he might fall asleep at the wheel. Cha Jung-moo was thrilled at the thought of seeing his beloved right now and said he was already looking forward to her arrival. Min Se-olha felt like she was in a fairy tale about love. She herself wanted to spend as much time as possible with the general director. The next day, they went on their trip, and even though it wasn't the season, they decided to enjoy the sea. Cha Jung-moo worried about her and asked if she was cold, but Min Se-olha replied that it was even warmer than she'd imagined. Later, they decided to grab something delicious to eat, and even this made the girl a bit nervous, which amused the man. After that, they went to a cafe where they ordered delicious coffee and desserts, enjoying the view of the sea together. As they walked by the sea in the evening, Se-olha shared that it had been an incredible day. It had been so long since she'd seen the sea, she'd forgotten how beautiful it was. Jung-moo listened attentively at first, but didn't say anything. Only a few minutes later did he suddenly address his beloved. The moment was so romantic, the sea was calm and beautiful, the sunset so vivid, and his girlfriend so stunning, that he felt the urge to tell her how much he liked her. Min Se-olha blushed hearing that. The wind played with her hair, and for a few seconds, she couldn't take her eyes off her beloved. Then the general director spoke again. He confessed that he liked Se-olha much more than she could possibly imagine. The girl squeezed her beloved's warm hand tighter and said she felt the same, that she really liked her Jung-moo. Then, smiling brightly like the sun, she added that he liked him so much that no one could even imagine. The man smiled warmly at his beloved. Those were important and heartfelt words. With this girl, he felt better than with anyone else. Hugging Min Se-olha with one arm, they talked about how incredible the place was, the kind of place they wished they could stay longer. Cha Jung-moo promised that they would definitely come back here as often as they could. After such a lovely walk, the couple found themselves with a great appetite for fried seafood. They had a hearty meal at a cafe near the beach. But Se-olha still had room for dessert. Even though she had eaten well, dessert was still an essential part of her life. Feeling her empty pocket, the heroine first said that she had seen a charming bakery not far from there. Then she realized she had left her phone at the cafe, confirmed by the empty pocket, and went back to get it. Luckily, it was still on the table. Min Se-olha couldn't believe she had forgotten such an important thing. She admitted that the time she spent with her beloved was the best, but maybe she was getting a bit too relaxed. She was becoming so forgetful. As she walked back to him, she saw that he was already talking to some girl. Luckily, the girl soon left the general director, and Min Se-olha returned to Jung-moo just as he was standing alone again. At first, he didn't notice her, so she had to call out to him herself. Min Se-olha joked that she stepped away for just a moment, and Jung-moo was already looking at pretty girls around. The man smiled smugly and asked if her reaction meant she was jealous. She, of course, denied it, after which Cha Jung-moo explained that the woman had just asked him for directions. Nothing more. Min Se-olha lied that she heard that already, so Jung-moo decided to tease her a bit, saying that the woman's beauty was hard not to notice. Later that night, the couple drove back to the sea to watch fireworks. Many people came out to admire the fireworks. Yes, it's not uncommon, but it's beautiful. But Jongmoo and Seolha enjoyed this atmosphere a bit differently. Luckily, the car windows were at least tinted. The fireworks outside didn't interest them as much as each other's lips. They had been kissing like this in the car for a while now. Cha Jongmoo, pulling away slightly from his beloved, said that their hotel was nearby, so they could go there, as it was a bit cramped here. But Min Seolha, already too excited, rested her head on her lover's shoulder and whispered that it was still too far. Seeing how excited she was, even Jongmoo blushed and kissed her on the head, inhaling the pleasant scent of her shampoo. After that, he placed his hands on the girl's waist and thigh, admitting that he didn't want to leave the car either. He himself didn't really want to walk all the way to the hotel. He'd rather stay here, even if it was a bit tight. Smiling, the man said he never would have guessed that his secretary Min was so impatient and affectionate. The girl put all the blame on his saying he kept seducing her, and that's why she couldn't resist. The man ran his hand along her leg and said that if this was temptation, then he wanted even more. But, according to his own words, he suggested they stop at kissing and leave the most exciting part for when they were at home. Although Cha Jongmoo himself could barely hold back, he still didn't want them to continue here in such uncomfortable conditions. But once they crossed the threshold of the apartment, the couple couldn't stop kissing, and during that, the man pulled off her nylon tights. Fortunately, they came off quickly. Along with that, his belt fell to the floor. Then the man lifted his beloved in his arms to avoid straining her legs. That night confirmed over and over again how much they liked each other, how wild and passionate their feelings were. Meanwhile, Cho Tae-gun's days weren't as vibrant, so completely exhausted, he called some girls and ordered drinks for company. It seemed he had come here to unwind, to drink and stop thinking about all the nonsense, to let out all his negativity if possible. The conversation with the man kept replaying in his head. The man had shouted, asking how much more he needed to invest in what was so special about Venus. That man said he knew the guy Jo Tae-gun had brought into the business, his classmate. What were the odds the blonde would get involved with him? The man even dared to raise his hand against Jo Tae-gun and slapped him hard. Only after letting out his aggression did he ask if the blonde really thought he could catch up to General Director Cha. And all of this irritated and affected him. He couldn't understand why Cha Jongmoo had suddenly appeared in his life. Looking at that photo of Cha Jongmoo and Min Seolha, he thought there was no way it was just a look. There was definitely a spark between them. A few seconds later, there was a knock at the door. Jo Tae-gun waited and told the guest to come in. The guest wore a formal suit and held a briefcase in his hands. Covering his nose with his hand, the man said he brought what the man had asked for, pointing to the briefcase. The blonde leaned forward, ran a hand through his hair, and tiredly said for the guest to hurry up and bring him the pills. Approaching Mr. Jo, the man admitted that due to increased surveillance, he had to start spreading rumors about Cha Jongmoo and Min Seolha in Venus. Jo Tae-gun didn't like the guest's words, and when he came close enough, the blonde slapped him. He explained his actions by saying he never asked him to do that and that he paid the man to do only his job. Jo Tae-gun waved at a girl to pour more alcohol and then said he would personally tell General Director Cha. It turned out the man had a golf game that week. In his mind, he added that loving secretaries must be a family trait in the Cha family. Throwing his legs on the table, the man began to think about how he could ruin the relationship between Cha Jongmoo and Min Seolha. Sometime later, Min Seolha opened a can of beer and admitted that she had always wanted to have a drink with Jongmoo. Getting comfortable, she said that although she had worked a lot for the general director, she had never seen him drink. So the question arose, how much alcohol could Cha Jongmoo actually handle, and how many cans of beer could he drink without getting drunk? The girl remembered that the general director often ordered drinks but never drank them himself. He had explained that he was just afraid of doing something stupid or causing problems. Only 10 minutes had passed after the man drank one can of beer, and he was already asleep at the table like he'd been drinking all night. The girl was actually surprised. She hadn't known this quirk about the general director. She had noticed he didn't drink, but didn't expect it was for that reason. Looking at her lover, Min Seolha thought he looked really cute right now. The serious general director, Cha Jongmoo, drank one beer, got drunk, and fell asleep at the table. So she lay down next to him, thinking that he could have just told her the truth, but for some reason, he decided to drink. The thought made her smile. The girl thought he was completely passed out until Jongmoo suddenly spoke, calling her by name. In a sleepy voice, he asked her to call him the way she had done a little earlier. Min Seolha didn't quite understand what he meant, but the man explained that he didn't want her to address him by his title, but rather by his name. The girl blushed a little and tried to recall when exactly she had addressed her lover by his name. And a memory surfaced when he had waited for her outside the restaurant, and she, feeling jealous, called him by name and said he was looking around too much. Back then, the heroine didn't even realize she had addressed him differently. But clearly, Jungmoo noticed and remembered. She thought his request was actually quite appropriate. Seriously, they were already dating. No need to always call your boyfriend by his title. Her own thoughts made her smile, and she came up with something. First, she placed her palm over her mouth as if she were about to tell the man a secret. Then she whispered her lover's name, blushing deeply herself. There was something intimate and even mysterious about it. The girl repeated her boyfriend's name several times, and even though he was half asleep, he blushed and smiled contentedly. Meanwhile, Taegun's guest walked away from him with a dissatisfied expression, wondering how long that blonde guy could even last. Scrolling through his contacts to find the name of General Director Cha, the man smiled, thinking that now he had some other options, though he still wasn't sure what that meant. On the way, he accidentally bumped into someone, hitting the man's shoulder. The man with reddish hair, still in a bad mood after meeting with Mr. Joe, snapped at him, telling the someone to watch where they were going. The man in the red suit apologized, and the guest suddenly recognized him as a relative of Jo Tae-gun. When he entered the room, everyone politely greeted the man in the red suit. He returned the greetings as well. At first glance, this man looked nothing like Jo Tae-gun and even seemed like a good person. The next morning, Min Seola woke up earlier than Cha Jung-moo. She was already dressed, so she decided to wake her lover. He didn't wake up, even when she spoke to him just as he had asked her to. Or maybe he was just pretending? When she called him her silly Cha Jung-moo, he blushed. They spent that day their own way, enjoying each other's company. The next morning, as usual, the alarm woke the girl at 7 in the morning. First, she rubbed her eyes and gave herself a moment to wake up. Then she remembered. Today was Director Choi's wedding. That thought instantly jolted Min Seola awake. That morning, she had to put more effort into her appearance. First, of course, routine. Wash up, brush her teeth, take a shower. After that, she picked out a dress from her wardrobe. In front of the mirror, she held it up to her body to see if it would suit her. Once she put on the dress, she selected a pair of shoes. Nothing too flashy, but something that would complete the look. Finally, she threw on a coat, did light makeup, a simple yet elegant hairstyle, added a few accessories, and voila, a beauty ready to go. She thought the general director was probably already waiting for her, so she decided to hurry. But because of her own decision, the heroine became a little less alert. And when she heard a car behind her, someone suddenly grabbed her shoulders. Fortunately, it wasn't a kidnapping. Someone had simply, and quite kindly, saved her from the wheels of a car, whose driver thought speeding down such narrow streets was fine. At first, her attention was on the car. That's what scared her. A man's voice pulled her out of her daze, asking her to be more careful. Then Min Seola finally turned to her rescuer, who was still holding her shoulders and had just asked if she was all right. The girl politely shook off the man's hand and replied that she was fine. She felt awkward because the stranger wouldn't stop looking at her. Maybe he was wondering why she hadn't thanked him. But no, it was much simpler. She looked a lot like someone he knew, and that's why he had stared at her and allowed himself to hold her shoulders. The girl said she understood, but she had to go. There was no time for small talk. So she said goodbye and left, thinking again that the general director must already be waiting. The man kept watching the heroine walk away for a while. His expression turned more serious once she was gone. Later, she and Cha Jong-moo finally met. This time, he wore a green suit that matched his skin tone very well. When the couple entered the wedding hall, the girl felt like her heart was about to jump out of her chest. It was a strange sensation, she admitted. At the wedding, they were together as general director and his secretary, so they had to speak with everyone they knew. Mostly, it was Min Seol-ha who did the talking, as a secretary. Jung-moo admired how confidently she connected with everyone. A few seconds later, he felt his phone vibrating in his pocket. Someone was calling. Taking it out and checking the screen, he saw it was his mother. So, of course, he couldn't ignore the call. She was an important person. That's why Cha Jung-moo stepped away first, to talk to her in peace and quiet. Lifting the phone to his ear, he didn't even greet her, but immediately asked the reason for her call. His mother, in the middle of setting out her food, smiled and asked if her son was very busy right now. She didn't want to interrupt something important. She explained that since her son's birthday was the next day, she wanted to make myeokguk seaweed soup and invite him to eat. The man smiled and said he would definitely visit his mother, but not alone. He would come with Min Seola. The woman said she'd try to prepare something extra delicious. Cha Jung-moo had warned the girl that he was going to take a phone call, so she just wandered around the wedding hall for a while. But she started to worry a bit when Cha Jong-moo didn't return for quite a long time. Still, she didn't have to be alone for long. Someone greeted and addressed Min Seol-ha. It was Director Kim. Seeing Min Seola by herself, he asked where their general director, Cha Jong-moo, had gone. The girl didn't get a chance to answer before Director Kim remarked that he was probably off talking to his girlfriend. Director Kim began commenting on how the man acted all high and mighty, all businesslike, but was just a lucky guy. That's what he believed, thinking the general director held his position only because he was born to someone who wasn't his father's legal wife. To annoy Min Seol-ha even more, he added a question. Basically, was it fair to say Cha Jong-moo was in Venus just for the money? The girl, remembering their conversation, replied that she'd also heard the story about the general director living far from his father due to family disagreements. And then Jong-moo had graduated law school at Korea University entirely on his own, without any help. And from then on, he earned all his success by himself. The girl deliberately asked if Director Kim didn't think that Cha Jong-moo's achievements were something to be proud of, but he didn't answer and said he had to leave. And General Director Cha had overheard the entire conversation from beginning to end, as he had been standing nearby. Min Seol-ha replied that indeed, Director Kim never had unimportant matters. That's why if he needed to go, he should just run. Luckily, time flew by. In the car, Seola admitted she was already tired from greeting and talking to everyone. After the celebration, they sat in his car and talked. The man had driven her a bit and said she did a great job and was probably tired enough to go and just crash in bed. But she didn't leave. Min Seol-ha stayed in the car for a few more minutes, silently glancing at the general director from time to time in a strange way. Cha Jong-moo even asked if everything was okay with her, and she hesitantly replied that everything was fine. Then she admitted that she really wanted to give him something and reached for her handbag. At first, she didn't take it out because there was still 1 minute until midnight. But when the clock struck 12, she pulled out the gift and wished her beloved a happy birthday. For a few seconds, the man just looked at her in surprise, speechless, unsure how to react or what to think or do. The girl explained that she had held back for 3 years since he used to send all her gifts back, and she was afraid the same would happen again. Smiling, he accepted the gift, asking if that was why she had been so nervous and fiddling with her bag. As soon as Cha Jong-moo began untying the ribbon, the girl immediately stopped him and said she felt awkward, so he had to wait. Cha Jong-moo said that made it even more intriguing, but Seola replied there was nothing that special inside that would blow his mind. He replied that it didn't matter what it was. It was from his beloved, and he already loved whatever might be inside. Seola blushed and thought that his gaze was dangerous for her heart, so it was about time for her to go. Before leaving him for good, she asked him to rest properly and get some sleep. Cha Jong-moo offered to drive her a bit further, but she refused, saying it was very close. She had already turned to leave when the man called out to her again. Smiling, Cha Jong-moo said he would definitely call her. And to that, the girl responded with a radiant smile and a sweet blush on her cheeks. A real beauty. Later, before even making it home, the man couldn't resist and opened the box with the gift from his beloved. Inside was a beautifully folded, elegant tie. Exactly the kind he loved. Looking at his first birthday gift, Cha Jong-moo admired it like a little child. It was truly a magical moment as he unwrapped it. But that magical moment was ruined by a single notification that appeared on his phone. He wouldn't have thought it was anything serious, but for some reason, his chest tightened when it appeared. And he was shocked to see that someone had posted an article about him in Min Seol-ha. At that time, Jo Tae-gun was looking at his phone, unable to stop smirking smugly. A little later, Cha Jong-moo was already at his father's. The man said it had taken quite a bit of time to settle everything. The man asked his son if the rumors were true, about his relationship with his own secretary. General Director Cha answered honestly that he had never played around with that girl and had never even thought about it. He explained to his father that this wasn't a game but a serious relationship, and not just with the secretary but with Min Seol-ha. However, the older man believed it wouldn't last. Jong-moo replied that not everyone was like his father, so he shouldn't judge others by himself. Then Mr. Cha, fully turning to his son, asked if he remembered the day he took the family name. Mr. Cha asked if Jong-moo had forgotten his promise to do everything in his power. The older man then added that first, his son would fully take over his position, and after that, they'd find him a suitable match, and he would marry. Jong-moo replied that he acknowledged the promise existed, but there had been a condition, that his father would save his sister Hyun-young. Mr. Cha said there was no point in blaming him for everything. Hyun-young was hit before she could receive medical help. Jong-moo said that the accident happened because Mr. Cha delayed sending her sister to the US, making everything worse. General Director Cha Jong-moo recalled how on the day of the funeral, his father tried not to show himself, so no one would learn about his extramarital affair. But the pain Jong-moo carried in his heart still reminded him of itself constantly, especially in winter. That's why now he firmly said that the surname before his name was just a formality, because his father had that surname. But that didn't give Mr. Cha the right to interfere in his personal life. Besides, the promise made so long ago had lost its meaning now. So Jong-moo didn't have to fulfill anything just because his father wanted him to. What exactly happened? Let us tell you. A long time ago, Cha Jong-moo found out that his dear sister had leukemia. His life was different back then, and it should have stayed that way. But his sister's illness threw him off his own life path. He was in despair. His poor mother didn't know what to do. Cancer treatment costs a fortune, and they simply didn't have the money. At the hospital, Cha Jong-moo ran his hand through his hair in worry and almost rhetorically asked whether it was really just medicine she needed to keep living. The only thing Cha Jong-moo could do at the time was go to Venus looking miserable and beg his father for help. In front of his own father, he dropped to his knees and pleaded for the man to save Hyun-young. Mr. Cha looked at his son with a cold gaze, thinking about what to say to benefit himself as well. Then Mr. Cha asked what Jong-moo was ready to do for him if he actually saved Hyun-young. Cha Jong-moo fully understood that these were his father's tricks, which he consciously fell into just to protect his sister. Mr. Cha then smiled and said, "So be it." Jong-moo was annoyed by that damn confidence and smile, but he held back, stayed silent, for his sister. Mr. Cha said he knew his son was a smart guy, so he must live up to all expectations. But what's the point of continuing to keep a promise from the past, allowing his father to influence him, if his sister was no longer alive? After all this, the man was completely worried and in a bad mood. For some reason, despite his efforts, everything always went wrong. After that, he called his mother, but only to say that he wouldn't be able to meet that day. In the morning, Cha Jong-moo informed Secretary Min that he would come later because he felt a little sick. He really didn't feel well and had already made himself some tea. On the phone, Seola anxiously asked about medicine, tea, and the hospital. But Jong-moo interrupted her and apologized for the rumors that had spread about them. Seola replied that everything was fine, especially since it had quickly died down. The man smiled and asked if it was even right for them to meet secretly like this. The girl blushed and murmured something into the phone, which made Jong-moo laugh, and he said her voice improved how he felt. He wanted to come closer to noon, but Seola began persuading him to rest all day, saying they had skilled workers who could handle everything. After their conversation, the girl thought about how in all her years of work she couldn't remember Mr. Cha ever taking annual leave even once. Now Min Seolha was worried that everything was okay with her beloved. Meanwhile, Cha Jong-moo calmly drank his tea, hoping to meet Seolha that day once his cough improved a little. But no, who would let him rest? Just as he wanted to lie down, the phone vibrated. And again, what he saw was nothing good. The man was already sick and pale, and now he seemed to go completely white. Meanwhile, Min Seolha, like all the employees, worked diligently so as not to let down Director Cha. Overall, they all managed very well, even without the director's supervision. But once, while doing their tasks, Secretary Min heard someone enter the office. At first, she was glad, thinking it was Jong-moo. But in the end, after turning around and looking, she realized their guest was not as pleasant as she had thought. It was Cha Jong-moo's father, who said that now he knew what his son's secretary, Min Seolha, looked like. The man calmly entered director's office and leaning on the desk, asked how long the girl had been working for his son. The question made her a little nervous, but she answered that it was about 3 years. Mr. Cha smiled smugly, saying that 3 years was already a long time. After that, he added that if they worked together that long, it was no wonder unpleasant incidents would arise. The man said they spent time together these days, talked a lot, both were lonely. The circumstances were perfect for feelings to arise. Rising, Mr. Cha said the first thing he could think of, that his son would soon marry. The man said the games were over, and he would marry his son to the younger sister of Jo Tae-gun, and the secretary should try to ensure there were no more rumors. Late in the evening, Cha Jong-moo went to a rather unpleasant meeting. It was the same man with red hair connected to Jo Tae-gun. He was the one who invited Jong-moo to the meeting. Arriving at the meeting even earlier, Cha Jong-moo was very angry and asked what kind of tricks these were. The conversation with Mr. Cha, though unpleasant, did not last very long. After finishing work matters, the girl left the office. She walked calmly overall. Almost nothing revealed her depressed mood. When the phone in her bag rang, Min Seola took it out. Jungmoo wrote that he was busy and apologized for making her wait. She didn't reply. She just kept walking, thinking about what had happened today. It had to happen sometime, right? It was love, or rather, a romance full of selfishness from the very start. But all those moments with Jungmoo, yes, years of working together connected them, but the brightest memories were recent. The man allowed himself to look at her tenderly, softly, not like before, not businesslike, almost like she couldn't even dream of. And she allowed herself to be weaker, shy, smiling, blushing, loving. And all the time she seemed ready for something bad. She felt wonderful with that man, but often was afraid and worried. But what good was being ready? It hurt. Now it still hurt, and in ways she never would have imagined. Meanwhile, the man who called Jungmoo to the meeting asked if Mr. Cha was very worried if he came running so fast. At first, that man decided to introduce himself. He went to meet the man while pulling documents out of his jacket. That man's name was Kim Sung-chan, and more, he was from the office run by Director Cha. Cha Jungmoo immediately said he didn't want to see any circus there, so Kim Sung-chan needed to explain exactly what he wanted. The man hid his business card, saying he understood Director Cha's keen interest. Then Kim Sung-chan asked if, in Cha Jungmoo's opinion, he knew his secretary, Min Seola, well enough. The man explained that they studied at the same institution only for a year, but he had something to tell. Kim Sung-chan talked so much nonsense that Cha Jungmoo really got tired of listening to it. Director Cha said that if he had nothing normal to say, he would leave this place immediately. And that was it. Jungmoo warned that Kim Sung-chan shouldn't say anything unnecessary or mention Min Seolha's name, or it would be worse. And in fact, Mr. Cha really turned around and was already leaving, wanting to get away from his office employee as soon as possible and forget this empty and time-consuming conversation. But the man didn't look embarrassed or angry, for example. On the contrary, he smiled. Then he asked if Director Cha Jungmoo hadn't forgotten a man named Min Dong-woo. Without waiting for an answer, he explained. This was the man who hit someone, fled the scene, didn't admit the crime, and is now serving a life sentence. They were silent for a while, then the man said that that day had been as snowy as today. Many years ago, on such a snowy day, Min Dong-woo, Min Seolha's father, took the life of one soul, the younger sister of Director Cha. Later, when it was already late at night, Min Seolha, having finished all her evening tasks wrapped in her blanket, was looking at her phone. She was worried that after those messages, her beloved still hadn't come online. And if she called him herself, what would she say? Suddenly, turning to her side, she saw something shining on the floor. She lifted herself from the bed, got out from under the blanket, and reached for a coin she had spotted. It definitely wasn't her coin. The girl guessed it had fallen before their trip to the sea. She remembered that it was the first time Jungmoo had come to her home, and she hadn't known, so she didn't have time to tidy up. The man thought the room was clean, but Seola was nervous about her unmade bed and the things lying on it. Cha Jungmoo came up behind her and hugged her, saying that when they lived together, she definitely wouldn't have time to clean. How did they spend that evening before the trip? Wonderful. They ate, drank tea together, and talked a lot. She even showed her beloved her photo album, from when she was a child, a student, a graduate. They laughed a lot. And then her beloved's shirt flew off in the direction where the coin probably fell from. That time, everything was special. They were so tender, hugging, even acting silly. When they realized they were getting too carried away, Jungmoo, blushing, said that he hadn't actually planned it. He just came to enjoy the company of his beloved. It wasn't said as if he didn't want to be intimate with her at all. The girl said she understood how it was, and stretching her arms toward her beloved, she said that was exactly what she expected. That day, she managed to make Jungmoo blush. After those words, they simultaneously leaned in for a kiss. Cha Jungmoo's hands roamed over his lover's body. He kissed her both passionately and very tenderly at the same time. That day, the girl wasn't thinking about anything bad. She wasn't preparing, just living and feeling how deeply she loved this man. These were such pleasant, very recent memories. Who would have thought something could go wrong? Probably for the first time in a long time, she felt uncomfortable being alone, even though she had lived here alone from the start. The next morning, although the man had somewhat recovered from his illness, he was still in a bad mood. Everything was somehow not going as it should. Besides all that, yesterday's conversation with that Kim Sung-chan reached the point where he asked for money. It was the price for the man to keep silent about everything and not to tell Min Seolha what Jungmoo learned today. He demanded as much as 100 million, giving about 3 weeks, and if the director didn't respond, he knew where to find Min's secretary. This whole situation irritated the man very much. Did he have a choice? A difficult question, but the amount was also huge. That man knew how to negotiate, hitting exactly his weak spot, Min Seola. Kim Sung-chan had delved deeply into his heart and affairs to be able to hurt him in that spot. Cha Jong-moo admitted that if this man wanted money, he could give it. But Kim Sung-chan still had something else he didn't reveal. What could it be that made that villain smile so smugly? Besides all that night he learned that Seola's father, the man he hated with all his being, had ruined his sister's life. It was hard for Cha Jong-moo to believe it, but anxiety growing in his chest brought him back to reality. Then Director Cha called an acquaintance and asked him to find out as much information as possible about Min Dong-woo, and answered the main question: was the father of his beloved really the one who destroyed his younger sister? The day went on. It was already past noon. There were no customers, so Eun-shim allowed herself to stretch, wondering if she should take a break. No sooner had she thought about it than a client appeared. As always, she served him successfully and politely said goodbye. She was in a good mood because it was a wonderful day. Eun-shim was adjusting her clothes when a sudden visitor quietly entered the store. Jo Tae-gun, almost behind the girl's back, suddenly said that she hadn't contacted him. Turning around, she saw that her client was the same rude man from the party with terrible manners and no tact. Fortunately, she didn't say this out loud, just thought it. And the man didn't take much time. They quickly picked out what he needed. Eun-shim tried to behave as usual, but it was hard to hide her discomfort in the presence of this particular person. While paying for the purchase, Jo Tae-gun asked once again if Eun-shim wanted any compensation for what had happened earlier. The girl politely replied that she didn't need anything, so he could leave without feeling guilty. The man said that in that case, there was nothing he could do and quickly left the premises, leaving behind a small gift. Looking at the gift, Eun-shim saw that the man had left her a branded lip gloss. After leaving the store, Jo Tae-gun became serious and angry again. This girl had touched something in him, but she didn't want to cooperate. The package with something he had bought just to drop by her store, he handed to his bodyguard. It really didn't interest him much. Later, the man settled into his seat in the car and looked out the window, lost in thought. Smiling, he admitted that it would be fun, but the main thing was to be patient. Now he had to get closer both to this girl and to Min Solha. Meanwhile, in Director Cha's office, he and Min Seola were discussing another company, and even the girl wasn't feeling very well today. Cha Jong-moo, raising his head to his beloved, asked her to send a request to Director Kim's secretariat about the schedule. After that, he handed her some papers and they both fell silent, a kind of awkward silence as both had personal reasons for it. Seeing that Min Seola looked tired, Cha Jong-moo aloud suggested that it was probably because of him. But the girl said it wasn't, not because of him, and then went toward the exit to finish her work quickly. She had already opened the door when Jong-moo called her name to stop her. The girl immediately shut the door and, asking what had happened, turned her head toward the director. In seconds, the man was already beside her and without saying anything else, reached out to touch Min Seola's face. Leaning over his beloved, he placed one hand on her shoulder and with the other tried her forehead. He commented that she wasn't hot, so she shouldn't have a fever. The director was truly looking at her worriedly, but Min Seola didn't understand whether he was like that, because she felt bad or if something had happened to him. With his hand, he gently stroked her cheek, holding it as if she were a cat, not a person. Then he lowered both hands, now looking even more simultaneously worried and somewhat sad. It was hard not to notice. Besides, he told Min Seola not to wait for him today and to leave early calmly. The girl was also worried, so she asked if the man still had any errands for today. Turning away from his beloved, he quietly replied that yes, he still had some business this evening. All the words she could have said remained stuck in her throat. She was a little embarrassed by this sudden change in mood. Such behavior of her beloved man upset her. He hadn't done anything wrong. It was just that she was worried. She quickly finished her work in the office, put on her coat, took her bag, and left the premises deeply lost in thought. The image of Cha Jong-moo would not leave her mind. He was different, strange, upset. Something seemed to weigh on his soul, but he couldn't say what. What could have affected such a strong man so deeply? She was already analyzing all possible options in her head. Seola could not stop worrying. Maybe he had already talked to the elder Mr. Cha, and this was the end of their relationship? She already imagined them sitting in some restaurant, holding hands, and the man telling her that their relationship was over. Moreover, she imagined him leaving her an envelope with money, asking at the end if that would be enough as compensation. But she wasn't going to accept this just like that. She decided she needed to talk to him on the phone in the evening. To not even doubt it, she said this out loud. But suddenly, a familiar female voice was heard behind her. Someone was asking which guy Min Seola was going to talk to. It turned out that Cha Jung-moo's mother was just out shopping. When the girl greeted Madame Cha, she asked her to just call her mother. The woman, smiling sweetly, asked if Min Seola had already had dinner, because she, for example, had not. After the girls left, Director Cha really did continue working for some time, dealing with work documents. But he was already slowly getting ready, or rather, gathering all his things, organizing documents. It was already a bit late. Looking at his phone, Jung-moo silently asked himself if any pharmacy might still be open. When he heard a knock at the door, he already knew who his guest was and invited Moo Young into the office. Turning to face the door, the director even smiled, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. His guest, with a kind smile on his lips, said that they really had lost touch after school and both had changed a lot. They practically didn't talk about anything personal. Moo Young and Cha Jung-moo settled on sofas opposite each other. The guest handed the director a photo from the scene. Of course, diving back into the past, seeing those terrible shots of the accident, wasn't something Jung-moo wanted. But now it was easy to see how it had all happened. There were several pictures. Some of them were related to Min Dong-woo, as Moo Young explained, and the rest were directly from the accident scene. These shots could easily prove one important fact. Cha Jung-moo spoke instead of the guest, saying these shots proved there had been enough time to save his sister. Moo Young nodded uncertainly. It was a difficult topic to talk about, and though the pain belonged mostly to Cha Jung-moo, his suffering spread, creating a sad atmosphere. The director was the first to break the silence, saying it would have been better if his sister had immediately passed away. No, these words didn't mean he wanted to get rid of his sister. It was just that if she had been hit and stopped breathing immediately, maybe it wouldn't have hurt so much. Moo Young turned his head slightly and replied that it was only a supposition that she had suffered, because it was hard to say exactly what happened right after the accident. He explained that there was no video camera exactly at the place where the accident happened, so he decided to investigate everything himself and found some camera from a nearby apartment building. The man explained that Cha Jung-moo already knows the results of the overall verdict, about how everything actually happened, that Min Dong-woo was indeed guilty. After consulting an expert, it was confirmed that the man who was at the scene matches Min Dong-woo's description. Moo Young explained that it's not worth paying attention to the minor discrepancies with the license plate. Those were unimportant details, so the verdict is that Min Dong-woo is definitely guilty. In other words, everything that the worker told him the night before was the absolute truth. Cha Jung-moo's sister was killed by the father of her beloved, and he had actually allowed himself to hope that maybe everything could turn out differently, that maybe they were mistaken. Silence fell in the office. Only the clock was heard, as the second hand changed minute after minute. Cha Jung-moo's hand clenched into a fist. It hurt that even now, after learning all this, the feelings he had for Seola hadn't disappeared. He remembered how bitterly his mother cried, how she told him that her daughter often appeared in her dreams and they cried together, and also that toy that Jung-moo found in Seola's purse. It was amazing, but it wasn't a coincidence. Now he knew the truth. And that day in court, when the gavel struck, when the verdict was delivered and life was already shattered. Since then, he believed that this feeling of hatred and anger would always remain in his soul, so unshakable, because they took away a loved one. Then a deep sorrow blossomed in his chest, so profound, so painful like never before. He felt completely alone in this world, not knowing how to behave, whether to share his pain with someone or, as always, rely on his own strength. And finally, all this, the whole tangle of his feelings and unspoken words, turned into something the most painful of all: despair. Cha Jung-moo sank so deeply into his own thoughts that Moo Young had already stood up from the sofa. But he didn't leave, silently waiting. The man approached the panoramic window. Despair choked him with thoughts of how unfair everything was, but nothing could be changed. Could he really be angry or hate the girl? The feelings for whom weren't just fleeting but grew stronger every day? And they grew in his heart with such a furious speed that it actually started to scare him. Anger, sadness, despair, and incredible love intertwined in his heart so chaotically that they began to suffocate him. Cha Jung-moo didn't understand why the two of them, why his mother had to go through this. Why them? Tears streamed down Cha Jung-moo's face from all this. It was hard to explain in words how painful it all was. It was already quite dark outside when Min Seol-ha and Cha Jung-moo's mother arrived at the restaurant. It was rather elite. In the evening, the activity in the place increased, everything came alive, and noise was heard from all sides. The girl sat at the bar alone while her lady companion went to the restroom. Earlier, when the woman asked about dinner, they decided to go to the bar together. More precisely, Cha Jung-moo's mother insisted that they go together. Min Seola felt awkward that they actually came here, meaning it was not a formal invitation, but a completely real one. Behind her, not far away, stood a handsome man who attracted the attention of most people. The girls blushed as they whispered to each other, wondering if he might be some kind of boss. After all, this man didn't look like an ordinary worker. He walked around with a tablet in his hands and asked the waiter if everything needed was available. But his attention was suddenly distracted by a familiar female figure. His gaze involuntarily caught on the girl. He had already watched the scene where another lady approached the girl he had earlier saved from the accident. But she was not a friend, as she looked older. An ordinary dialogue took place between them, where Jungwoo's mother apologized for making Seolha wait, and she replied that everything was fine and she had just ordered a cocktail. The man himself did not notice how he had started staring in that direction, but the waiter brought him back to his senses by asking if the gentleman was going to leave already. Jungwoo's mother and Min Seola were talking about something trivial, the beautiful interior, tasty drinks, and desserts. Meanwhile, the man smiled and replied that he would still like to inspect the storeroom. The woman said that inside, the place looked like it had just opened recently, but in fact, it had been operating for many years. It turned out she and Cha Jung-moo's father often came here before the family conflict happened. Suddenly, the woman seemed to switch. She smiled but looked a little sadder and shared that because of this conflict, she now hopes Min Seola will take good care of her son. The girl even stumbled and blushed when the woman said that her son seemed so serious that he was already considering marriage. The woman said that after the accident, Cha Jung-moo closed himself off, became different but still remained a sensitive, gentle, and vulnerable guy. Min Seola delicately asked about the accident and learned that her beloved had a twin sister, 2 minutes younger, who was hit by a car. It was an accident caused by a drunk driver. Min Seola recalled that her own father had taken a life of someone else when she heard this story. Meanwhile, after today's meeting with Seola's friend, Jo Tae-gun couldn't calm down and hired a girl for the night. It seemed this was definitely not the moment to think about something else, but he simply couldn't get the thoughts out of his head. Even now, he remembered that girl from the party. At first glance, she seemed like a very noble woman to him. But even in the consultant's role, the girl seemed stubborn, with a bit of spice, so to speak, to his taste. The girl he spent a few hours with asked when they would meet again, but Jo Tae-gun replied that it wouldn't happen. The reason was simple. He had never spent the night with anyone, without exception, more than once. And of course, the girl behind him was outraged and loudly expressed her dissatisfaction. Jo Tae-gun didn't listen. He took out some papers and simultaneously looked at his phone, wondering why Kim Sung-chan wasn't calling him. Right now, he had the information about Min Seola that the man had given him. But no one explained what he was supposed to do with it. Meanwhile, Min Seolha and Jungwoo's mother had already said their goodbyes. The woman got into the car to go home and asked the girl to let her know when she got back. The girl promised she definitely would and waved goodbye to the woman. The snow that night, thought the main heroine, still wouldn't stop falling. It was beautiful, even though winter usually reminded her of not the best times. She had sent a message to her beloved some time ago, but he was probably still at practice because he hadn't replied. The girl sighed heavily from everything and muttered to herself that she wished to sort all this out today. It turned out the familiar man had come out after her. He asked what could have caused her heavy sigh, which was audible from afar. The girl, smiling awkwardly, asked if she had met him there because the man decided to relax and have a drink. He replied that probably yes and introduced himself as Kim Woo-hui. The girl was polite, so she introduced herself too. Kim Woo-hui said he lived nearby, so he could accompany the young lady if she, of course, didn't mind his company. He explained that there was a construction site nearby, and going there alone at night was probably not the best idea. But Seola explained that she still had to stop somewhere else. Then the man opened up, saying the girl could become their regular client, so he had to look after her comfort and handed her an umbrella. The girl was already ready to pay for the umbrella, but Kim Woo-hui explained it was free of charge, no need to pay. Then, after their conversation and saying goodbye, she opened the umbrella, first extending her hand outside it and catching a few snowflakes. Then, thinking about the snow that wouldn't stop, she went on her way to where she needed to go. Kim Woo-hui watched the girl's figure gradually disappearing, but now his expression was mysterious, not like before. Exhaling as heavily as Seola had earlier, he admitted that for the clothes he was wearing, it was a bit chilly. His thoughtful gaze dropped down, and then the man thought of something strange. At first, a very sad picture passed through his mind. Then he thought that someone wished to leave this world as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Cha Jung-moo, looking at the snowman on the balcony at home, couldn't stop worrying. Everything had piled up so suddenly. Rumors about Min Seola, his father's dissatisfaction with his relationship, the terrible truth, and winter, the time when he lost his sister. Cha Jung-moo felt broken. He no longer felt the cold of the winter night, and instead of the street noise, it seemed as if his heart was pounding 3 times louder. What if his sister had survived? What if that man had just called an ambulance and they could have saved her? These thoughts haunted him for many years, stirring an uncontrollable anger in his chest and awakening a desire for revenge. Until now, he hadn't thought that Min Dong-woo had a family, and it turned out to be his beloved Min Seolha. When his phone vibrated, he knew it was her calling, but didn't know what to say if he picked up. He didn't hate her, wasn't angry, it seemed. He just didn't know how to behave anymore. After all, he had lived a first life too, and it was hard for him to make decisions. But he worried that his beloved wouldn't give herself rest, would worry, and probably wouldn't sleep. Picking up the phone, he was already prepared to talk. But the voice wasn't his beloved's. Someone asked who he was to Ms. Min. Then the man on the other end said he was an emergency worker and that Ms. Min was currently being taken to the hospital. The man needed no more. His hand holding the phone dropped, feeling as if his heart had stopped. The same night, the same snowfall, the same time of year, a similar voice of an emergency worker. It had all happened before with someone he loved. Hearing those painfully familiar words about his beloved girl ending up in the hospital, Cha Jung-moo broke into a run. The entire way to the hospital, he thought about how Min Seolha was the only one who completely filled him, and the only one who truly mattered in his life. Returning and seeing his beloved lying in a bed behind, he again felt how deeply he loved and feared. And for the second time today, he cried. This blow was the most painful, the most unexpected, and he wanted to believe it would leave this person's life here, in this world. And that's where we'll leave it for now. The story is far from over. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.